officials and state
that
coordinators will be
she's
asked to answer
dictating.
questions?
Well, because
That makes sense.
they're the
Thank you.
jurisdiction over all of this, that we have no say.
It doesn't matter.
Um,
She cannot withhold exculpatory evidence. They
hello.
wanna make a charge, they
Hey,
gotta
Fred
have their
Satilli,
evidence ready. They cannot.
may I make you a or Shannon maybe too? Shannon, did you want to be a co-host? And Fred, can I make you a co-host? How many co-hosts can a lady have?
I'd be happy to admit people as they arrive.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm looking for right now.
Perfect.
Sounds like a plan.
And Shannon, would you like to be a co-host?
Sure.
Gonna get the rest of my dinner and I'll be right back.
Then you may have some lovely powers that you might like to have. Interesting. You guys can speak freely. You're all being so quiet, so serious.
Let me say good evening to Shannon Bookie. Hey, Shannon.
Evening, morning, something. Been going all day.
Me too. Crashing in right now.
This is David Hare from Santa Cruz. I'm doing well today. I just recorded a couple more people.
Excellent. And I just mailed off a packet to D. Yates today.
Okay.
Jackie's with us.
I just recorded and published 2 more people yesterday.
You're kicking butt there, Mr. David. Do you, are they on your county? Are they in Santa Cruz or are they neighboring?
They're all in Santa Cruz. I did somebody in Nevada County and somebody in Humboldt County. But we're asking for help.
Barry, I'm going to mute you because we keep.
The secret is I just bought a new Epson printer that with an automatic feed. Up till now, I was using 1 by 1. It was terrible. It was killing me. So I put out the $336, and then the big surprise then was it's another computer. It took me a whole day to figure out how to run this thing.
To get them lined up, yes.
But now, man, it's great. I just drop them in there and it just cranks them out.
Awesome.
Scans and then later on copies. I mean, wow.
Awesome. I've got my own. I'll get the Nancy set up here. So there's my new printer, the color one. But back behind it, I don't know if you can see way back there, there's a big black one. And that big black one, that's like my awesome scanner. So all my scanning is done on black, but all my printing is done on color.
Okay. No, I can scan in color and it's just great.
Excellent. So now we have James.
Hey, Nancy.
Hey, Satya.
Hi,
I was
Satya.
looking for James because I was going to make him a co-host, but I'm not sure if this is the right one. Anyway, I'm doing it anyway. I got you, even though you weren't talking, James.
Hey Nancy, I'm going to drop my last question. It's the very last one at the end of the page. Is all the pages. I've already asked that question.
Okie dokie. I feel like a school teacher. I know it's taking attendance.
James says his mic's not working.
His mic's not working, but his controls might be.
He did have a computer problem last week, as I recall.
He says he can type.
You can type? Okay, well, I can't watch this chat, so we're gonna need help there. Satya, do you want to do that? Do you want to just watch questions on the chat?
Yeah, sure.
Just in general,
Nancy,
Yeah.
are you going to record on your side? I think the live stream automatically records, but I'm not sure, just in case.
Oh. Okay.
I'm also recording on my side.
We got recordings everywhere. Awesome. Sounds good. So we are live streaming tonight for the very first time on californiaassembly.com homepage. This is sort of a practice run for us for our du jour for sure rollout on August 30th, if that's going on still. Although I'm not really sure. Maybe Deba, can you just see if there's questions that are coming up on the chat on the live stream? Because I don't know how we're going to handle that quite yet.
Nancy, I'm going to do my best, but we'll just have to see how it goes on this first round.
No, I don't. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Hello, sisters.
Hello, Mr. Brian.
Hey, Brian.
Welcome.
Glad you're here, Brian.
Glad everybody's here. It's like, when I'm working and get really hard doing time, you're sweating and think, this is like getting that breath that you stop. And this is what I get when I come and talk to you ladies.
Thanks, Brian.
That's what you give too.
Did he call me a lady?
I called you a lady. Hey, do you guys feel honored that it's not so much, not honored, but I feel sort of like we got a gift that we're able to talk to Anna like this tonight. I think
100%.
we'll clear a lot of what I call the moose patty away.
A beautiful gift.
Anyway,
I'm not sure that I made the correlation with the moose patty, but
well, what's been going on, I consider moose patty. But anyway.
You all muted?
okay.
Yes.
Well,
I
here
can't hear anything.
So that was D. Yates saying yes, the moose
I'm not
patty
invited.
go away. Is that what that was?
No, I was saying that's like BS. Moose patty's like,
I got it. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. It's MS. It's it's not bull, it's moose.
right. He's up
They
north.
make bigger piles.
It's like bat guano.
Yeah.
There we go.
we hear you, Chris.
Did you hear all that?
Some of it.
Did you hear me on the phone?
Yeah, I heard you on the phone.
I muted you eventually, honey.
Thank you. Sorry about that. That was a tough call.
Hey, did we get an updated version of the questions?
It went out with the agenda today. Did you not see the agenda? My email's going into spam folders.
You know what's happened is I probably had over 55 emails today. I've been frantically trying to read them in between appointments. And no, I haven't been able to find that, but I will go back and continue digging through. I've opened every one of them, but I obviously missed an attachment.
Well, the subject line was Anna von Reitz and conversation with Anna, or something like that. Well, welcome, Valerie.
You're muted. You're muted, Nancy.
Nancy, you're muted.
Who muted me? That was
You're
You're
muted
gone again.
Who's muting you?
You're muted again.
Valerie.
I heard-
Welcome. We're really glad to have you. And what a fabulous first introduction to our California Assembly with Anna. That's fantastic.
Nancy, are you the chair?
I'm excited to be here.
I'm sorry.
We're not really sharing because there's no meeting. So
Right.
we're just doing a far looser Robert's Rules of Order tonight, but we still, because there's so many people on, we're still going to maintain our order. And there will be several people have control over the mute button right now, so I don't know.
Power
if
I've
it's
never
you or
had
me.
before.
Hey, thank you for the info.
Oh, thank you for lowering hands, James. That's great.
So Nancy, can you make me co-host? I'm not co-host. I don't know why.
I can. Do you think there's a maximum on co-host? That I do not know.
Possibly.
Who?
Christina.
Well, if you need space, I'll relinquish.
Shoot, Christina, I need you to hold on. Make co-host. Hold on. I think you're good.
I am good. Thank you.
Okay, good. Hello, Peter Zapra. I think I just read your name. We missed you on Sunday.
Oh,
Hello.
Maximize this button.
Hey, Chris, can you hear me?
I can. Hi, Al.
Darn it, I was hoping you couldn't. Anyway, I'm here.
Hi, Al.
Talk to you.
That's funny.
I recognize the voice,
Hey, Al.
even though it's been a while.
Hello.
How's life down south?
It's very hot and muggy. And I think there's a fire in the hills behind us. It's quite a ways away. No danger, but it's going.
Welcome in, boss.
Hello.
Anna's here.
Anna's here.
Mhm.
Welcome, Anna. Do we want to pin her?
Oh, what? There's Anna. Anna's on our call.
I know we need to.
There I am.
I pinned
Here
her.
she is.
There you
Thank
are.
you.
You're welcome.
Welcome.
Even though you can't see me.
You can kind of, there you go. Now I got you. Now
I
I
can
can
see
pin
you.
you. All right. Allow to multi-pin. So
Now we expand. I want to
How
see.
exciting. Welcome, Anna.
Welcome, Anna.
Welcome, Anna.
Hi, Anna. Thanks for being here with us.
Hi, everybody.
Hello, hello.
Looks
we
like
got one more minute. One more minute.
Somebody's driving.
We love you, Anna.
Thank you.
Yes, we do love you.
Thank you very much so.
I need all the added girls I can get. It's been a tough month. But we are making great progress. And today I even found a way in which we can bring some of our off ledger accounts on ledger.
Woohoo! Awesomeness. Very exciting news.
Excellent.
That is. There's a gigantic, I guess you could call it a Donnybrook with the UN and the UN Corp and numerous other parties that have been administering our government without us knowing it. The UN got involved after the Second World War, and Jimmy Carter just pushed it over the edge in terms of basically giving everything associated with our government to the UN as a trust function to be administered by the UN. And that is something that no American has known unless they were deep, deep, deep digging into various aspects of the federal record. So now we know that the perpetrators of this entire scheme had planned for a long time to move from their storefront in the Roman Catholic Church to a new storefront with the UN organization. See, they always hide behind something that's good so that all of the nefarious stuff that goes on in the background isn't noticed or isn't believed, or, you know, it's their modus operandi.
Anna, may I start us with a prayer? It's 7:01, and I know you have tons to tell us, but I want to just start, and I want to using our prayer that we do every General Assembly, and that's using the words of the Declaration of Independence and the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. In the name of Almighty God, nature's God, our Creator, we ask you for wisdom in our purpose, that your glory shine in this amazing task of reconstructing California. Put in our thoughts your ideas, on our tongues your words, so that through our actions, success will glorify you. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory. Hallelujah.
Amen.
So be it.
So thank you so much, Anna, for coming and joining us in California. It is a very, we're very honored and blessed to have you join us. We are very, very grateful, all of us. I just want to make sure when we start out that you know who we are, because we don't know that you know who we are. So we want to make sure you do. We just uploaded our database, and it didn't have everybody on it, but it was 1,132 people on the database for California Assembly. We have state-of-the-art IT, security, hosting, automating responses, etc. We meet weekly, both free. General Assembly meets weekly on Mondays. The state militia meets weekly on Wednesdays. The general meetings meet weekly on Wednesdays. We have a town hall weekly on Wednesdays. We have a Common Law 101 class weekly on Thursday mornings. We have 15-minute stand-up IT meetings Monday through Friday for 15 minutes. We have a procedures committee that meets weekly. We have a brand new formed ombudsman's committee that hasn't met yet, but is going to. And we have a marketing team. And we are introducing de facto versus de jure conversations at public meetings all over California since July. Los Angeles has had mock trial, and we've reached out to courthouses and military bases for courthouses on Los Angeles. So that's who we are, that's where we're at. And now we have some questions, and we might want to do it sort of faster because we got some questions and these were solicited to all of the people on California, all of those who are living men and women on California. Dee, you get to go.
Hey, Anna. Nice to talk with you. Hey, I wanted to just say thank you for being here tonight. I know the Assembly is really, really appreciative of it. We're super appreciative of all the work that you do and your guidance. I think there was some confusion in our Assembly, and I just wanted to touch base with you directly and find out how we're doing as an Assembly. I want to know if there's any course correction we need to do, if our hard work is on track, or if you're happy with everything we're doing. We look to you for your guidance. So I just wanted to ask you straight, are we doing a good job?
Well, it's always kind of difficult for me to touch base with an assembly for the very first time. This is the first time that I've actually talked to you, you know? And so what I have as, you know, sort of the markers of progress are things that come to me secondhand in terms of, you know, problems that go on with all the various different groups that are trying to organize in one way or another some aspect of the actual government, like, Patriots United and the National Liberty Alliance and so many other different organizations are working in California. And it's hard for me to see the progress in terms of getting people awake and alive and working toward a common goal. But if that's not a reflection on you, that's more a reflection on the general state of the country. There's so much confusion in all corners that we can't afford to be confused. And the things that come up on California, so far as I'm concerned, are really kind of practical, straight across the board things, meaning that the situation in California isn't that much different as far as I can see, just on a larger scale than many of the other states. We had some core misunderstandings early on that really needed to get worked out. And they didn't come up, in part, I think, because people were afraid to contact me. And really, I don't know how that's possible, because, my email and my phone number are out there for you 100% of the time and always have been. So I would just encourage you that when you have questions, just go ahead and pick up the phone, type in the email and ask. And if I don't respond immediately, it means I'm getting deluged, which happens on a regular basis, and just keep on sending me emails and picking up the phone, and eventually it'll work. I will respond. Worst comes to worst, send me a letter. I mean, things get crazy where I'm at, but I do make a good faith effort if I know people want to talk to me about anything or have questions. So I'm glad that you did get in contact and that we set up this meeting tonight. And I hope it's not the last time that we get a chance to just sit and talk like this. So number one, I'd encourage you to do that. Do that and, don't get off track, because it's easy to get off track. There are many confusing aspects to this. Many things that are similarly named. And we regularly have problems with people misinterpreting the history because the names confuse people. And you have to really study for a number of years and become very conversant with the time frames of things in order to understand and recognize what they're talking about at any given time. So if you have questions about the nomenclature, how things are styled, how things are named, what's being talked about in a document, get in touch with me instead of trying to guess. Okay?
Here we go, Anna. We got 5 pages.
Yeah, right.
Of questions.
Yeah,
Can
exactly.
I ask? Anna,
Otherwise, I think the only other thing that's come up with California, is handling money. And handling money is just a very straightforward kind of thing. If someone walks up to me and gives me a donation for Anna von Reitz, I understand that that's money that's supposed to be used for me and the living law firm and our research group, and that's what it goes for. If somebody walks up to me and gives me a donation for the Continental Marshals, well, that's what it goes for. And so if somebody walks up to you and gives you a donation for the California Assembly, it goes into the California Assembly account, right? I mean, that's just common sense. And so I would just ask everybody to operate on that principle when it comes to money, that when someone gives you money for a specific purpose, you're honor bound to use it for that purpose.
Thank you. Can you tell us, when is the state considered to be up and running? Is it when we're 2/3 counties are populated, last man standing, there's a court. What is that definition, and what is the basis for that definition?
Well, their goal was to completely depopulate California and all the other states so that nobody was left standing on the land jurisdiction. Then they could come in and claim that the land was vacated and that they were then able to come in and resettle us as unknown parties, right? If you look for examples of this in history, you can see what Britain did to Ireland in the 1850s and 60s. They depopulated the country in a systematic manner. And then they came in and claimed that those persons who were left were unknown and of unknown origin. And until 1916, they ran roughshod over the Irish in ways that are almost unspeakable. Okay, so what they were intending to do was the same thing. They were just updating it to modern times and getting ready to do the same thing to us. But if there are at least two people, remember, this is all kind of predicated in a crazy way on Bible, where two or more are gathered. So if you have at least two people who are claiming their birthright political status, you can invoke the last man standing rule, and you can witness the fact that there's still someone there. All right. Now, the last man standing rule is a contract concept. If you have a contract and you have, say, 5 parties to that contract, and 4 of them disappear, go bankrupt, whatever else, the last man standing gains control of the entire contract and anything that's associated with it. So that's what the last man standing is about. In this case, the last men standing on California were 2 elderly gentlemen who heard the call back in 1988, and they knew what I was talking about. And they came forward and they proved up and demonstrated that they'd been born in California, had lived there all their lives, and had no affiliation with the United States or the territorial government, and that they were willing to stand up and say, yeah, okay, we're Californians, we're still here, hello. And so the attempt to claim that California was vacated was defeated by just 2 old geezers who, stood up and said, yeah, we're Californian. And so that's how that works.
So as the Federation, looking at when a state is fully assembled, we would just need 2/3 of the counties to have last man standing.
No, it doesn't. No, last man standing works at a different way and a different level. Last man standing is an heirship. This is where you are the inheritors of the land of California. And you can be an inheritor of the land of California with never being a citizen and never having an assembly or anything like that. Okay? The government is a whole different deal. The assembly in California will be fully assembled and will be fully seated when you have all 4 of your basic pillars up in operation. Now, that isn't saying that you have to have them all fully populated to the extent that you want them to be or that they need to be ultimately, but you have to have your General Assembly working, your Business Assembly working, your militia working, and your Juror Assembly running a court. At least one court has to be fully staffed, vetted, and in place. So those are the 4 big things that you have to really work on.
So California has that close. We were so close to a court, and then we lost our bondsman for the state. Los Angeles had a court, and then we lost. We just, they go in and out like that. So we're very close to that. We're very close to that. So are there any other specific, like when would you say that we were standing?
Well, if you have those 4 pillars in place, it's really just a matter of you working on filling out the rest of your infrastructure, right? And then the assembly is in place. It doesn't mean that you are totally in charge of everything, because you have delegated away some powers. You've delegated away international powers to the Federation and to the Confederation once it's up and going again. So the Reconstruction then kicks in. As soon as you get the assembly up and standing on its feet, and you have enough activity and enough committees that are doing enough of the functions. Am I, making that clear?
Mhm.
Okay, once you get enough people organized and you're actually getting those functions taken care of, then you can start looking at forming your state of state and actually doing the reconstruction that's necessary. So first you have the state assembly, and the state assembly is the state, right? You are California. Then the assembly organizes the state of state, the missing state of state, the American version. We have a state of state called the state of California, right? But that's a foreign entity. It's a business entity that was organized offshore and brought here. And so what you're doing is organizing the American version of that. And you will have oversight of that. And you'll have to pay for it, which is the other aspect. I was just talking to North Carolina today about this, the same thing. You'll have to charter a state of state organization, and that has a particular style and name to reconstruct the government at a federal level. Because remember, we have the Federation, and then we have the Confederation.
Right.
And the Confederation is made up of state business organizations. Okay? But until you have the assembly, you're not ready to move on to that.
Correct, I understand. So the counties don't really play in that. It's just the state, the pillars of the state and the committees and the functioning of that. The counties don't have a play.
Well, the counties are a different entity because the counties hold the national soil jurisdiction. Okay, the beauty of what we did and the way we did it was that we came back from where we were shanghaied in the international jurisdiction, came back to the land, and as we came back to the land, we also populated the counties because everybody that joined the state assembly also lived in a county, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the counties are forming the national soil jurisdiction. And that's a union state, okay? So there's these different levels.
Okay.
You have the national, and then you have the international. And the state functions at the international level.
I'm sure we're going to have more questions about that down the road, but that's great for now. Thank you. Dawn, you have a question?
Sorry, I have to unmute. I do. And I really thought this was going to be shown a little earlier, our timeline by D. I want to ask you, Anna, we have a timeline, and I believe that it was formed, I don't know if you want to say anything about this, Nancy, but based on what you indicated you thought was a good idea. And we're trying to follow this timeline. And, on the one hand, we're forming assemblies, but on the other, we have some really serious things happening in California. Can you hear me, Anna? I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
But you just kind of glitched out there for a second.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go
Okay.
ahead.
So we have some really dangerous things happening in California. We've had weapons used that have wiped out entire towns and cities, completely pulverizing the houses to dust while leaving all the foundational trees and shrubs in place. And we have good old Governor Cuomo, who's really, Newsom, who's really a monster. And so, you know, we have a lot of poisoning of the population. We have a lot of really dangerous, deadly things happening in our state. And on the one hand, we're trying to form the assembly perfectly. And on the other hand, we're trying to follow this timeline, which means we're already out at city and county governments and with supervisors and boards announcing, giving them their first verbal notice of a discussion that's coming up. So what I'm concerned about is how do we do this fast enough so that Californians are not killed and burned out of our state before we're formed, I guess. Do you have
Okay.
any ideas on that?
Well, once you declare yourself as an American, you're an internationally protected person, and the UN is responsible for protecting you. Unfortunately, at the same time, we have the British territorial government that is testing out these DO weapons and all this other war crap on everybody under the pretense that you are a domestic citizen of their government. Okay? If you look back in the 1970s, it seems like the 1870s, but it was only the 1970s, the UN had a series of treaties that were the first of the kind established. And what they did was they said, okay, if you want to test any of these exotic things like weather warfare or, you know, Tesla technology or any of this sort of thing, it has to be done on domestic subjects. So they test their war weaponry on us under the pretense that we are domestic with respect to them, in the same way that they use our soldiers as guinea pigs and just shoot them up with experimental drugs and other crap that they are experimenting with. They do the same thing here to us, as if we were all soldiers and we were all under contract and we were all under some sort of dependency to them, when in fact they're getting their paychecks from us. And the way to handle this is through the United Nations, because the United Nations has to be informed by someone saying, hey, we're not domestic with respect to the US territorial government. Hey, we're not domestic with respect to the municipal government either. It's your responsibility, Mr. UN Secretary General, to make sure that our population is not harmed. That is his absolute responsibility with respect to us ever since the 1980s. And so when we have things like chemtrails, or we have DO weaponry being exercised against a small town, as what happened in Paradise, which is another atrocity and an act of genocide. And when we have things like mandatory door-to-door forced vaccinations and the shutting down of private businesses, all of that is being done under false legal pretenses. And all of it needs to be objected to directly to the United Nations Secretary General, who needs to say to those other participating countries and principalities that, hey, we just had word from people in California who say that they're not US citizens and they're being affected. You know, we just heard from people in California who aren't municipal citizens and they're being adversely affected. And that is what we use to shut them down. The other thing that we use to shut them down is when they try to apply their law to us. And we remind them, no, here's our only contract. It's called the Constitution. And the only thing difficult about using that as an answer to them that is very effective, by the way, is determining which one of these yahoos, you know, organizations are addressing us or misaddressing us. And so oftentimes when you are attacked by these people on the street, you don't know which one is addressing you. You don't know whether it's the municipal government or the territorial government. And so you don't know which constitution applies. That makes it hard to carry the argument. If you are addressing a municipal employee with the wrong constitution, they'll laugh at you. But if you're addressing a municipal employee with a municipal constitution, you'll win every time. If you are addressing a territorial employee with the territorial constitution, you'll win every time. The trick is telling one from the other. And I will tell you that initially, in 99.9% of the cases, you will be addressed by a municipal employee because the municipal government has had the actual service contract up until this past November. And now they're just continuing to carry through and try to force us to accept a contract by assumption. But so far they haven't been able to do that. So they're just continuing to carry on, and the Pope is continuing to pay them out of his own pocket for once. But anyway, these are very effective means that we have that we don't typically know that we have, and therefore we don't use. Complaining to the UN is effective, and also bringing up the correct constitution and putting it in their face is very effective. There's a young man named Harley Bourget who has been highly effective in doing exactly that, just simply pointing out the fact that, hey, all this other stuff doesn't apply to me. Here's what applies to me. It's called the Constitution. Here's what the Constitution says. And we all need to study the Constitution because that is the only contract that they have that can be applied to us. And the same token, there's always the other side of the coin. The constitutions are the only contracts we have with them, at least potentially. But then they also are obligated to perform. So one of the things that the state assembly can do, and nobody else can do, is to enforce the constitutional contracts against, pardon me, just a minute here. There. One of the things that you can do is enforce the constitutional contracts on these rats. And you don't do it necessarily at the local level. You start at the level of the principals, because you are principals to those contracts. Does everybody understand the difference between a party and a principal?
I think so. And if we don't, we're going to look it up as soon as we get off the call.
Okay. So principals are sovereign powers. Okay. California, the state, is a sovereign power. So you have other principals that are holding the other end of the contract. You've got the Queen and you've got the Pope, right? Two constitutions, two contracts that are in play, and two other principals that are not doing their job. Okay, so together, the states, acting as the federation, have the ability to hold the Queen and the Pope accountable to the constitutions. And that's why when you declared yourself as a Californian and the subsidiaries, the subcontractors of the subcontractors of the subcontractors come after you, you have the means to go back and say, hey, wait a minute. I didn't agree to let you experiment on me or close my business or any of this other rot. And if your courts address me or misaddress me, I'm going to object. And I'm going to take certain actions which are going to shut your courts down. Now, we were discussing today, how can you shut their courts down? Well, ultimately, you shut their courts down by giving notice that your courts are up. Once your courts are up and rolling and actually functioning with respect to you, then you don't have to answer to their courts unless you are actually in their jurisdiction. Like if you were on a Navy yard or visiting a federal institution, you would be on their turf. And if you committed a crime on their turf, you would be subject to their court. But if you're just a Californian wandering around in your own backyard, minding your own business in your own little town, then they have nothing more to say to you. And that's already decided. That was decided in 1866 by a Supreme Court ruling that still stands, Ex parte Milligan. And so when your courts are up, their courts have to stand down. And you get to function under American common law and not martial law, not international law. So that's one way you can shut their courts down, which is just by doing your own business and minding your own people, right? The other thing that you can do to shut their courts down now is to start forming litigation committees, where every time one of us gets hauled into one of their courts for any reason, be it tax, be it child custody, be it anything, anytime that they misaddress one of us as if we were one of them, and they try to hold us accountable to their statutes, well, then you have 5 people go with the person who has been summoned as a defendant, right? And you all sit there with your pens and paper, and every time that they violate a constitutional right or fail to provide due process, you all mark it down and you observe what goes on in the court. Then you go home, you write up your statement, your testimony in the form of an affidavit, and you get this pile of affidavits that describe what went on in that courtroom that wasn't correct. The person who is the plaintiff adds their testimony in lieu of an affidavit, puts it on top, and you deliver it to the Supreme Court Justice, that's the Chief Justice of the State Supreme Court, or I should say the State of State Supreme Court. And we've gotten this down to such a science that in some cases it takes less than 45 minutes for the case to be dismissed and the judge to be dismissed.
Well, thank
so
you.
when the judge is dismissed, that's a real flag, you know, then that just goes through the entire legal community like poop through a goose, and they go, oh my, you know, we better start doing our jobs.
There's a lot of people on the call right now who are taking voracious notes, and we have recordings, and I bet our litigious committee will be up and running in a second.
That's what I want is poop through a goose. Can you wait 1 second, Nancy, because I'm not sure, because I do have a question that was included in this. And by the way, thank you, Anna, that was wonderful. What a breath of fresh air. So we have been trying to follow a timeline, and I don't know if you're aware of our timeline, and I'd like your comments about it. And I just want to make sure I'm not sharing out of turn, but is this all right? I thought it was going to be shared.
Yeah, it comes up a little bit later, but it's the
all right, I can do it later.
Well, we're here now. We might as well do it.
Okay, do you want me to screen share?
It's based on your notice, Anna. You gave notice on March 4th to the federal government to vacate, 1 year's notice. And then David Lester Straight's timeline. So we backed it in, and that's our master plan. So right now we're giving notice to the meetings, and August 30th that we start the conversation. Is that right?
You want me to show it to her, Nancy? I've got it up.
Look, we gave them time to get prepared.
Right.
We gave that notice to the principals. The principals have yet to give it to their underlings, their instrumentalities, they're called, the agencies, the subcontractors of subcontractors. And what we need to do above and beyond all else is maintain the peace, because the peaceableness of our assemblies can't be called into any significant question if we're to continue and to be unmolested, relatively unmolested. So, the timeline, I think, has been quite impractical in terms of what we could accomplish in terms of the money and in terms of the banking structures that are needed to enforce it, and all the other aspects of it that have to come together. We were supposed to have funding in April of last year. And by various subterfuges and various excuses and foot dragging in general, we're now at the point of having our own banks up and beginning to get organized and beginning to get transfers of assets in. But without assets, what are we going to do about taking over, say, courthouses? At most, at this point, we have enough people to put together maybe 2, 3, 4 juries, 4 jury pools, say. And we could occupy some of the space in some of the courthouses. But we don't have the kinds of numbers and the expertise and the money to support those facilities as yet. When we do, when there's a wholesale, what's called a lawful conversion, then all of that will just fall into place. But getting in the face of the de facto incorporated government doesn't serve our interests before we're ready to actually take over the responsibility. So we had I won't call it a firm timeline by any stretch of the means, but we had an idea that we could, within a year or two, accomplish what needed to be accomplished. And we're now right about in the middle of that projected period. But all of these various delays have resulted in a situation where even if we had control of all those courthouses, we couldn't make use of them and we couldn't maintain them. So job one remains getting our courts up and functioning, even if they have to function in the basement of a church for a while. And then we can begin the conversation and should begin the conversation, but they're going to laugh at us to begin with, and then they're going to go, oh my God, and then they're going to finally say, okay, well, you can have this courtroom in this courthouse, and bit by bit, as more Americans return, then we'll have the numbers and we'll have the reasons to want more courtroom space. And their role will diminish because they'll have fewer and fewer cases. Just naturally, as the population is shifted back into being the lawful citizenry, and we're addressing them under the public law instead of any private law, they will get a relief of their caseload and we'll have an increase of our caseload.
So
does that make sense?
Yeah, what do you recommend then as a trigger for us to do that plan, or do we throw away that plan? The plan, you wrote an article about it with David Lester Straight, a strategy on how to change a de facto government into a de jure government.
I didn't write anything with Lester David Straight.
No, you wrote about him. No, you wrote about his.
I wrote about him.
Yeah.
And
I'm not challenging that. I want to plan for forward. What do we do now with it, right? So do we wait for a new date from you? Do we keep on going and have, obviously we keep landing people, we know that, and we keep doing what we've been doing. But is there a plan forward?
Well, I think that particular plan was based on a best guess that didn't come true. Okay. Mm-hmm. We are now in the process of getting the funding. Once the funding comes through, then all hell breaks loose.
Okay.
All of a sudden you have all the means to hire people, you have the means to organize, you have the way to rent space, buy space, do the things that need to be done. to act as a responsible sovereign government, because right now it's all just volunteers and it's all just our Shanks mare and our sweat equity and whatever donations we can individually contribute, which is not sufficient to take over and run the megalith that has become the government. Even if we intend, as I think we surely do, to reduce the footprint of government very significantly, we still have to have our ducks in order. We still have to have our assemblies properly set up and organized. We still have to have funding of some kind from somewhere doing something, right? So that we can take on the bite that we have to take. And my best estimation is that we are still a little way away from having funding.
Okay, great, perfect. So when we hear we've got funding, we move. And we got a plan, so we'll just execute. Okay, perfect, perfect. That gives us time too, thank you.
We do need people.
Oh yeah, no, we're not stopping there.
1,132 people is wonderful. It's still a very big state.
Tiny, we know. We're very aware of that. Carmen, you had a question? Do you want me to keep going or do you want to ask it?
Yeah, Anna, we are learning to self-govern in our sovereign counties. And we are learning to self-govern in our state assemblies, our General Assembly, our General Assembly, the militia, and the business assembly. But I'm confused because then you can dictate to us and disassemble us.
I'm having a bit of trouble with maintaining the connect here, but all right. Everybody hear me?
Yes.
It's really pretty simple. Until you're up and fully functional, you're not fully empowered and you're not able to be seated as a member of the Federation. And that is a problem. You're functioning on, you say if you were an 8-cylinder engine, you're functioning on 2, maybe 3 cylinders now. When you get up and you're actually functioning fully and you have your militia, you have your court system, you have your business assembly, and you have your general assembly, I don't know why that's happening, but when you have all those pieces together and they're, reasonably working for you, then you can step aside from that assembling process. Okay, you're assembled. But in the assembling process, the Federation watches over everything. All the states manage to get together those 4 basic functions. Every state has to have those 4 basic functions in place and working before they're fully separated. And I guess you might think of it in terms of a baby with an umbilical cord. It's still going to be a baby even after the umbilical cord is severed. But right now, you have an umbilical cord to the Federation, which is going to feed you and take care of you and, look after your security and everything else until you are separated. And even after that, you're going to need the Federation for a number of reasons, one of which is that all your money was taken offshore. Okay? So that's in our jurisdiction, and we have the mandate and responsibility to go after those lost assets and locate assets and return them in whatever way is lawful and legal to the states and to the people in those states. So you're going to want to keep under the wings of the Federation for all of those functions. You're going to want to rely upon our expertise for legal counsel, because as I said before, it takes years to be able to sort through all of the deceptive name games and other things that go on with the federal government. And so you're going to want to have the Federation there, and you're going to be asking us questions if you're wise, because it's too easy to lose your status as a state assembly. We just recently had a case where some state assemblies, thought they were going to form a state charter. I don't know where people get these ideas, but they, went right back into the whole business of being a state charter, and therefore a state trust, and therefore under the hegemony of the British government. And so people say, oh, be afraid of the Federation. You need the Federation. You're not going to survive without the Federation, and you're not going to get your money back without the Federation. And I think it bears saying again and again and again that the Federation is not the federal government. Somehow there's been some misunderstanding somewhere in somebody's mind where the cross wires went. The Federation is the federation of states. The state assemblies, just like you, all of them coming together and acting in their own best behalf to get what they need out of the international jurisdiction. This is the fundamental thing that people are not getting. They're so used to association with federal that they think, oh, well, that's the federal government. No, it's not the federal government you've ever known. It's the federal government you're owed, but which you've never had. It's the federal government that's supposed to be protecting you and your interests internationally, which long ago was reduced down to these subcontractors. So in fact, you've had nobody taking your side in anything for the last 100 and some years.
Well, thank you, Anna. You've been very clear on all of that. With that though, who are the employees? Who are the federal employees? I feel like there's a bottleneck, just like California had. Oh, did we have a bottleneck? Poor Caesar and poor Wayne, they were bottlenecks. And it took a lot of work to get that unbottled so that communications could flow and work could get done. We've got, more than 20 recorders right now, more than that probably. So who are the employees of the Federation? Who are they? How do we get a hold of them? How do we reach them so we don't have to go through the bottlenecks? Is there a way to do that?
Well, unfortunately, at this point, we are rather bottlenecked at the Federation level because we don't have funding to hire a whole bunch of people. And, the functions that we have to perform are very intense. We've got diplomatic missions, we've got treaty negotiations, we've got banks to set up, we've got all these different arguments in the International Court of Justice over land rights and who should inherit the land. And we've got friends and foes challenging everything that we do. And we have to keep our noses to the grindstone with all of that stuff and more or less rely upon other Americans to get busy and do their state assemblies according to the instructions that we can give them.
Well, Anna, the people in California want to offer you our labor because we've got a lot of people. So if you need help with bottlenecks, probably not to do, international treaties, but certainly to help with some of the stuff that we know and we've been doing. Please call on us. Please ask. We have a needs list up on our website that we need volunteers. We would love to hear what volunteers perhaps you need that we can help you fill so that you're not so bottlenecked for us, for the states.
Well, I can tell you right now that there are some areas where the Federation and the state interest completely overlap. And one of those areas is BLM. Because the land of California is supposed to belong to the people who live there. And it's all been surveyed under US patent. And we're going to need a large number of patent clerks who are competent to find those patents for people so that they can put an end to the foreclosure nightmare. And so that we can continue to make headway on the land claims in California and secure them from secondary claimants who are trying to come in and say, oh, well, we own that because the state of California, the territorial or the municipal government, owes us all this money. So they're taking your property to pay their debts. And we need patent clerks. We need people that can research the BLM database. And when somebody has a foreclosure issue, they need to be able to go locate that on the map and say, okay, well, this parcel is part of that township and part of that section and part of this patent, and here's the patent. And I'll tell you what, there isn't a federal court in the universe that has ever denied a US patent. So if you're standing there holding that US patent, the state judge may deny it, but they know that you're going to go to district court. And the moment that you hit the federal district court is going to say, dismissed with prejudice.
Fantastic.
So this is one way that we can end the foreclosure nightmare for many people, is simply by doing the patent research. And we have not had the patent clerks to do it. It doesn't really matter where you're located. You can be a patent clerk in California and do patent research work for Utah, or you can look up a land grant in Virginia. So everything is on these automated and computerized databases now. So we do need patent clerks for sure. And we need the litigation committees to start going around and witnessing what's going on in these courts, writing up the affidavits and delivering them to the chief justices of the state Supreme Courts, to get rid of incompetent justices and people that are being, flagrantly criminal in their misadministration of justice. And all of those things are things that you can do. Other things that you can
That's
work
great.
on.
You know what? We're just going to put that. Let's keep moving on. I know we're still on page 1, and that's the call tomorrow night at the General Assembly meeting. Bring up your volunteerism. We're going to be calling out for those 4 land patent clerks and litigation committee. Christine, you're next. Do you have a question, Christina?
Yeah, Anna, this is Christina, and I echo everybody else as far as all that you've done for America and for all of us who are now standing on the land. I've been, listening to you and reading your blogs and information that goes out, and I just feel that somehow you're not in alignment with the 528 on California, and I was just curious if you agree with that.
Well, our entire banking system is aligned with a completely different and, for lack of better vocabulary, higher vibration institutional thinking in terms of what's good for people.
Yes.
And what's important in life. And because ours is a people-centered government and not a institutional flavor government, what we're working toward is a community-based government that works under committee structures instead of this horrible top-down corporate model that we've all been taught since babyhood. And I think that is much more in line with the 528 concept of actually treating each other as brothers and sisters and as, people that are connected by history and language and life and land and water, and are not just these, I don't know how to put it, but we're not just corporate entities. Okay.
And And I see that 1,000% on the banking side, that I totally see that resonance. And I just have heard things that you've expressed and seen things that you've written. And I just wanted to get, I didn't want to assume. I don't want to assume anything and how you feel about California.
Well, I think California is an absolutely beautiful state and always has been. There are some certain things in its history that cause anomalies in terms of its institutional history. And there are certainly some oddball things that have happened, mainly because of the gold rush, actually, that still haven't been resolved. And I mean, that was 1848.
Well, sure, but I'm asking you, woman to woman, about how you feel, because what I've heard in writings and in your speech, I've heard some things that I'm curious how you currently feel about your relationship with the people on California. Because if there's a block, if there's a discord, I want to take personal responsibility to help mend that.
Well, I think that I have a certain amount of, let's say, tiredness.
I couldn't even imagine. Yes.
And when I have things that seem to me to be just practical things that go wrong, like just what happened with, trying to form a state charter when the state is an unincorporated entity and has to be an unincorporated entity to maintain its sovereignty. I get very tired and very frustrated sometimes. And I think some of that comes out. But it's only because I'm so completely overwhelmed all the time on all fronts with all the different things that go on in international. Because remember, in addition to these 50 assemblies, I have to carry the international fight. I'm the one that has to go over the international court cases. I'm the one that has to bring the claims before the high courts. I'm the one that has to enforce the Constitution at the level of the principles. I'm the one that has to sort out the monetary system, not only for this country, but for the entire world. And, to even imagine the
way I look at it, Anna, is that some of us, we have plates in life, and you've got lots of serving platters, not just one or two. You have many, and so I hear what you're saying, and that anyone that could ever even imagine to step in your shoes would be tired, would be exhausted, and maybe say things at times that wasn't directly from the heart.
Right. And I will tell you honestly, even though I love each and every state, and I do love them, and I regularly ruminate about the beauties of each and every state and all the people in it. I mean, how do you think I keep going? The only way that I can keep going day after day, year after year, is out of just pure love for this country and every state and all the people in it. That's the entire wellspring of the energy that keeps a 65-year-old woman rolling at the rate that I roll every day.
Well, we would sure love to hear that from you more often. And maybe we need to communicate that to you more often so that we can fill your bucket and you can fill ours.
Well, I'll tell you the truth. When it became apparent that I was going to have to play a role in organizing the 50 state assemblies, simply because there was such a dearth of information and knowledge about the state assemblies as they existed prior to the great cataclysm of the Civil War, I was absolutely overwhelmed. And I said, I can't possibly do this. It's too much. There is no way that I can organize 50 state assemblies with one hand and do all the other stuff with the other. And people stepped forward and they said, we'll help. And they have. people all over this country have heard the call and they've understood the situation and they've bravely gone forward and they've reclaimed their political status and they've rebuilt their assemblies. And they've done this in spite of the odds and in spite of people that have had different agendas who have come in and tried to mess with it and to redefine it and to sidetrack it and do all sorts of other evil things to it. But I still feel like we need to have more people with more legal expertise and more experience in the law on our staff. And that's more a matter of just logistics and money than anything else. This past week, we had a summit conference with Chief Fast Horse of the Lakota Sioux Nation and Bill Elwood, who is an expert in national law as it pertains to counties, and also is very well versed in commercial law. And we had some wonderful discussions, and it was just great. And I was left thinking, you know, if we could form a super committee of people that have legal expertise and lawful expertise at the same level I do, then we could really form a juggernaut of knowledge, and we could roll through the international stuff a lot faster. We could organize the states and the counties a lot more efficiently, and we would have a blessed situation. But we don't right now. As it is, I get on the phone and I talk to other people pretty much nonstop every day. And if I'm not talking to one of the people from the states about some problem that they're having, I'm talking to these other legal beagles, and we're passing around our latest finds and our latest research, and we're helping each other dig for things that we know exist, but we can't find. And it's this constant additional other world that's quite apart from the assemblies.
We have much gratitude for your being here and for your bringing your openness. And I have gratitude for that.
Thank you. And I have gratitude for all the people who have come forward to help save this country. I really, really do. And I hope that we can all come forward and just kind of get on the same wavelength, the
Yes.
528, as you put it.
Yes.
And move forward together.
Yes,
and,
move forward.
You know, do away with these misunderstandings and suspicions and all the rest of this stuff, because, you know, there is no other reason than to get this country back up on its feet and functioning as it should. You know, we've got our 12-cylinder engine we've been functioning on for 160 years.
Yeah, we're 160 years behind, so let's get to it. Well, thank you very much. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. So we're gonna bridge now to actual Reconstruction. So this is some hard-hitting questions that probably will be really easy for you. Considering that California never had assemblies prior to our 1849 Constitution, the signers of that Constitution were bar attorneys from the East Coast and military and Lincoln administration. Do we have permission or request to reconstruct our state based on the historical documents? Are we required to reconstruct from a specific point in time or from the 849 Constitution, even though it was de facto going in? Seals, flag, all of these questions, where do we reconstruct from?
Okay, well, that's a very fair question. The fact is that all of those seals, flags, and other things don't actually belong to the de facto. They belong to us, to all of us, the living people. All of that property was allowed to them for delegated responsibilities. And so when it comes to reconstructing, or in California's case, constructing for the first time, or Alaska's case, I mean, Alaska just became a territorial state of state in 1959. You can imagine. There's no history of assemblies here either. So what you do is you look at the jurisdiction. You look at how the land-based government is supposed to work. And then you create that function and operate it. It's almost like a mathematical function where, you have this equation and you put it through this black box of you add 4 and you subtract 2 and you multiply times 3 and then you get your result. Well, with the land jurisdiction governments all being operating on the same equation, if you will, it's just the equation that counts. You don't have to have a history of an assembly in order to have an assembly. And once you have an assembly, you can go ahead and create your own state of state organization and join the rest of the members of the Confederation and rebuild the Confederation, even if California or Alaska or Hawaii or Oregon or whichever were never part of the original structure. You can still build your own widget that fits in that structure.
Would you recommend us templating off of another state? What is Alaska doing?
Well, we're doing the same thing. We're building our assembly. Our people are declaring as Americans, and we're putting together the General Assembly, the Business Assembly, the militia, and the courts, because that's what a land jurisdiction government is. And we don't have to have anything predating. We just have to meet those requirements and understand the functions and be in the proper political status to make it work. Now, when it comes to reconstructing your state of state, that is a process by which the assembly, which is now functioning on its own and doing its own work, takes a further step and establishes a charter for your state of state organization. And I've explained numerous times, but I'll just briefly go over it again. A state is not a state of state. They're two separate things. The state is responsible for setting the goals, the direction, the budget, oversight, making decisions about things as we have already, like enrolling the Western states, outlawing GMO humans as property. Important issues can be decided now by the state assemblies. And that just increases over time. But the state and the state of state are two separate functions, two separate entities. The state assembly creates a charter. That charter creates a state of state. And it's specifically styled as the state of California, upper lowercase, capital T on the. And that is the American subcontractor. That is the American business organization that takes care of the day-to-day functions of what you would think of as the state. The things like taking care of licensing businesses, granting charters to other corporations, collecting any taxes or fees that are due, managing public lands, state parks, all that kind of stuff that the state assembly isn't really set up to do. The business organization takes over and does.
Good. That's good. Dawn, do you want to go next?
Yeah, so thank you so much, Anna. We've actually had some counselors at law that are very highly educated in common law, but I'm sure not as much as you, suggest that we possibly could be looking like we're creating a new government within the government, which is insurrection. So we have been concerned. I just want you to know. And I want to know about seals, flags, and things like that. Is that the same for the counties? Do we need to, for the suggestion has been put forward that if we create new seals rather than using the old original ones, it looks like we're creating a different new government. So could you comment on that, please?
Well, all of the seals and flags and things belong to the people. They don't belong to the corporations, right? So we're not the ones that created a separate new government within a government. We're not the ones acting in insurrection. They're actually the ones that claimed an emergency and seized upon powers that were never granted to them. So the only insurrectionists in view are the territorial government and the municipal government. And when I hold them feet first to the fire on this, they go, yeah, you know, we didn't do anything like that. Well, yes, you did. Well, it was an emergency. We didn't have any choice. Well, no, it wasn't. You could have gone to the people and told the people what was going on, and we could have conducted rational elections, and all of this would have been done and over by 1866 instead of, you know, dragging on for 160 years. Well, and, you know, and then finally they give you this slant-eyed look and they say, well, you know, if you knew that this wasn't right, why didn't you guys all get together and do something about it long before this? And the plain fact of the matter is that they did everything they could to obscure what was actually happening. They didn't tell us, they didn't educate us about it. They didn't help us in any way, shape, or form to regain our feet after the Civil War. In fact, they did a lot of skullduggerous things to prevent us from taking the proper action after the Civil War. So, you know, I'm not too worried about our position. I'm worried about their position in terms of insurrection, because the way things stand, they're the ones that committed treason. And they need to be thinking very seriously about their options going forward, because just like I woke up and realized that, oh my goodness, if I don't get on my feet and report this and object to it, I become an accomplice to it. They have the same sort of scenario. Once they know the truth and they continue to go on as if they don't know the truth, they are becoming accomplices to the crime. And this is crime. This is not about politics. This isn't about, you know, your political identity. This is about crime. Has nothing to do with religion, race, Democrat, Republican, or anything like that. This is just plain out and out crime. And unless they want to be accomplices to that crime, they need to stand up and back us.
So a little more about this, and then I have a question concerning the number of counties. So for example, a lot of governments here in California are still using their original seals. So then if we use the same seal they are, well, I guess we're restoring that government, but we're also, I don't know, it doesn't seem like I want to use the same seal as the pretenders that are creating all kinds of false information. Can you just give a quick opinion on that, please?
Well, seals belong to the realm of the international. And so they seized upon our seals and have been using our seals in the guise of being the territorial government, in the seagoing territorial government, in the absence of the actual government, okay? So those are our seals. They belong to us. They've always been ours, just like the flag is ours. And all these different things, that are taking place in the international jurisdiction are taking place under a mirror-like sleight of hand. Try to imagine a mirror, and on one side you have an identical appearing image, okay? You've got the land jurisdiction government over here, and you have the sea jurisdiction government over here. They look identical, except that they're obverse. The left hand is the right hand of the other. And so when they are using our seals, they're actually usurping our position under the excuse that they have a custodial interest. And they have no right to do that. Not when our assemblies are in session and we're here, standing here, foursquare. Hello, we're Americans. So the ones that are in the wrong on that particular issue are the de facto corporations that have just come in and arbitrarily started using all our stuff in our absence.
So for example, papers, that we fill out for people, which are the rubber stamped seals. And there's kind of a place in California where we try to have that seal be a little different, be special, so that unless it's on a paper, nobody can see it. If we put a seal on something we don't use, we record or shred that. And our counties have separate ones of those. So should we be going for the historical seals and using those to make our stamps for papers, or what concepts do you have for that?
Well, we've basically made new seals, but we have every right to do that. And that way we don't have to fight with the de facto over anything. And later on, we can straighten it all out. Because as the state assembly, you have the right to make up your own seals and do whatever you want. You're not, with that sort of stuff, you can identify your county as your county. And if they want to continue on using your seal, you have nothing stopping you from saying, well, yeah, that's our seal too. It's just the sea jurisdiction using it.
Great. So that's good. I really have had some of these common law counselors scare me into thinking it makes us look like a separate government. So I really appreciate you answering that. And I have a whole nother topic I want to ask you about. California had only 27 counties at the time that it joined the Union, but we now have 58. So when we're trying to reassemble, do we have to, is there something about having to have a certain 2/3 of the original assemblies or 2/3 of the present assemblies, or none of that even applies to this discussion?
Doesn't even apply.
Okay.
When the counties are set up, the people within the boundaries of that county become the assembly. So if you are living within the boundaries of that county and you're an American, and that includes people that have been properly naturalized, who have chosen to go the extra step and actually declare that they are adopting their state citizenship. All those people create the assembly for that county. And, you could have as many counties as you needed or had to have to make it a sensible distribution. And it would still all be the same.
Thank you. Thank you. I yield. I appreciate that very much, Anna.
Thank you. Thank you, Dawn. Carmen, do you want to take your next question?
Anna, why are we following Terry's 4 pillars? Is there historical justification or documentation that we can refer to, and rather than our 1849 Constitution for available seats?
It's a matter of what the functions have to be. You have to have an assembly, a general assembly representing the people of the state, including the nationals. And you have to have a business assembly that doesn't have conflict of interest to be able to handle international business. You need a militia to be able to defend your sovereign state. And you need a court system in order to be recognized throughout the rest of the world. Those four things. And if you don't have those four things anywhere in international jurisdiction, and remember, the state is an international jurisdiction. Okay? If you don't have that anywhere in the world, you don't have a state. And our forefathers actually went forward and created the business assembly by almost default, because what they were concerned about was conflict of interest. And in order to understand that, you have to go back to the time in which they were alive and living and what they had to contend with. They were trying to form an entire country out of colonies that belonged to different foreign nations. You had Spanish colonies in the South and in the West. You had Flemish and Dutch colonies in the mid-Atlantic states. You had French colonies all across the bottom tier of states. And you had British colonies throughout New England and the southeastern states. And they were somehow trying to bring all this together to fight as one country and to function properly as one country. How do you do that? And what's to keep those other foreign countries from continuing to meddle? You know, a lot of different things had to be thought through and put in place to protect us from exactly the kind of meddling that has created the whole problem that we're looking at right now. And one of those measures was to create an international business assembly, which would be composed of people that had no other affiliation to any other government. And back then, when they said any other government, it meant Britain or Spain or France or the Netherlands or some other country. But in this case, it continues to mean the instrumentalities of those foreign governments. So the reason that they set up the International Business Assembly and the state citizenship requirements was to avoid conflict of interest and meddling from foreign entities. And as you can see, we've had a considerable amount of meddling from foreign entities anyway. We've had the British in here operating the British territorial United States government as if it were the United States. And we've had the Papist municipal government in here operating as if it was the United States, while the actual Americans have suffered and been pillaged. So this assembly structure that we have is designed to put an end to that to the extent possible by eliminating conflict of interest. And that's the way they set it up. And those four pillars are functions that all governments, all state governments, all principalities worldwide have to be able to do, no matter how they have internally established those functions. I mean, in some other countries, there isn't a separate business assembly. In some countries like Switzerland, everybody just goes down and votes by hand. They raise their hands in the middle of the street, and people stand on the balconies and the rooftops, and they count, literally, and it's that simple. Here, we had to have that because there were so many foreign interests already embedded at the time of the colonization.
If I can add to that, what I believe I'm hearing, Anna, and I would want to just make sure it's clear, is that you're giving us the foundation, but all of the other additional things, like we talk about the litigious committee right now that we're talking about, and I think about a veterans liaison. Like, these are just suggestions, but these are not, they have nothing to do with actually standing and having our courts and having our, they're just a general sense of what else you could consider kind of idea.
Right. Well, you know, we made up that committee list that kind of showed you how the committee structure could be done.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that isn't some sort of mandate telling you have to have this committee. That's just showing you what you can do to support the four pillars, the four basic assembly functions, and how you can organize it better so that you have more help being delivered to the people. You know?
Perfect. Carmen, are you done or did you have more? And if not,
I had one more. If Reconstruction is to be done at the county level, I'm a liaison for the 50 states, and we're talking all about the county level and reconstructing the United States from the county level because they have sovereignty. Why do we not elect one senator on each county and representatives or assemblymen, as in California, according to the population on each county?
Well, those are all efforts and situations that are things that have to be discussed. It's sort of like changing the Constitution. That's not how we ever in the history of this country ever organized things before. So there's no precedent to do it that way now. And what we're trying to do is to reconstruct what once was and use that old machine that's in the back 40, and get it booted up to a point where we can consider making changes. But if we don't have something solid to start from, we don't know what we're going to end up with. And, a lot of these people, they get it in their head that the county is the be all and end all, because that is the basic unit of government, right? But then there are other people who say, no, it's the township. The township is the basic unit of government, even though large segments of the country never had townships and still doesn't. And so the way this was set up, and we're talking pre-1860, is that the counties could also be called parishes in some parts of the country. And they had their own parish law, still do in Louisiana, by the way. But what you're talking about is a level of units in government. So you could have a parish in Louisiana, and you could have a county in Wisconsin, and you could have a collective of townships in Maine that make up a county, okay? And you have all of these different units that occupy the same level. They are forming a layer, like a layer cake, okay? The county layer underlies the state layer. Or maybe I should reverse that. The county layer lays on top of the state layer, if you're thinking about it in terms of land and soil, because the land underlies the soil.
Can I add to that, Anna? Where does the term soil, is that like a lawful description from somewhere? Where
comes from British land law, which we inherited. The British long ago made a distinction between soil and land. And the rationale for this was that the top 6 inches of the soil was where we did our living and breathing and everything that we do day to day. We stand on what? The soil, the top layer of the land. Whereas the land actually is an international jurisdiction, because if you get down below the surface, below that skin of soil, you find yourself in a no man's land where there are no markers. I mean, the land and soil underlie everything, the entire planet. I mean, think about the bottom of the sea. You still have a layer of soil and you still have a layer of land, right? Yep. So the soil is the national jurisdiction that you have to control to have control of what's going on day to day. And that's why it's so singularly important. And that's why it's the national jurisdiction. The land is what underlies that. And it is where you get your aquifers, your minerals, the supporting structure of the soil. And you have to have both together in order to have something that works. Because if you have the soil above the land, what happens if the land disappears? Then the soil just caves in and you have this reiteration of a new whole situation. And if you have the soil, but you have the land, but you don't have the soil, then you don't have control of what's happening day to day in your lives. So from British land law, which we inherited, the soil is a separate jurisdiction.
Okay.
And it belongs to the counties.
Perfect. Thank you. Christina, did you have a question?
Yes, thank you. So there's been some confusion, and you may have already answered this question in the beginning, but that because California was vacant, abandoned, I guess different words to describe that, that there needed to be a claim on California. So I don't know if that has been done yet. Does that need to be done still?
Okay, our position is that California was never vacated. The people were simply left uninformed and defrauded and misrepresented. So, you know, we do not consent or admit to any such vacated status. That's something that certain self-interested, mostly British entities would like to claim, but we never give an inch on that one. And as for claiming the assets, we've done that. We began with the municipal government assets, which are the service contract assets. And then we rolled it back to the territorial assets. And each and every one of those were claimed all the way back. So those liens and claims are already established in international jurisdiction, and you don't have to worry about them. They have been, yeah. That's part of what our team did over the past 20 years. And those are all still in, they're still active and they're still protecting everybody.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Terrific. We're moving on to financial stuff, banking. So I know my question is, are you going to ask, is it just a matter of time and rollout for the states and the people to open up trust account, or not trust accounts, but accounts in a de jure bank?
Okay, well, what will happen? We have the bilateral banking system. We found out that the banking system was always supposed to be set up in a particular way that was lost after the Civil War, just like so many other things were lost after the Civil War. What's supposed to be is we're supposed to have an international trade bank that has a wholly owned subsidiary commercial bank, so that the international trade bank is supposed to control the commercial bank. The international trade bank stands under public law, and the commercial bank that is owned by the international trade bank is forced to function under public law because of who and what owns it and administers it. Okay. Well, after the Civil War, this strict relationship of ownership of the commercial banks went away, and suddenly the commercial banks were like a bad dog let off its leash, and they just took off and started functioning as commercial banks do without regard for the public law. Okay, but now we've discovered this little flying factoid of history and realized how it was supposed to work and why it has broken down and why it doesn't work now, why we have a criminal banking system. And so we have moved to reinstitute the bilateral banking system, where every country has its own international trade bank and it has its own commercial bank at a national level. And they're both under the public law, because that guarantees the honesty and transparency of the banks. So we're busily building our bilateral blue dot banking system. And within that, you have the Global Family Bank, which is a trade bank. You have the Global Family Bank of Commerce, which is a commercial bank. You have the American States and Nations Bank, which is a trade bank. and you have a San commercial bank, which is the commercial bank attached. Now, what will happen is that underneath the American States and Nations Bank, California, for example, will have its own international trade bank, and it will have its own commercial bank as accounts. Okay. And that way we assure that each layer is protected. The California bank will be protected by the American States and Nations Bank. The American States and Nations Bank will be protected by the Global Family Bank. And in that way, you've got this kind of an interlocking structure that protects at a smaller and smaller level until it gets down to the individual account level. So, for example, California would have a state of California account, and it would have a county account for each one of the counties. And it would have a city account for each city. But then you'd have the county level, and the counties would each have their banks and credit unions that are set up so that they can distribute and have their work within the county. It could be, you could have a state bank, and then you could have a county bank that only does transactions within the county.
Okay. So it's a timing thing again. We're a little ahead of the game because you're just up.
Look, what we're looking at happening is at a very large scale.
Right.
And what we're looking at is having the American States and Nations Bank have 50 accounts, one for each of the states. And from that account, being able to branch off and do all of these institutions that can distribute prepaid credit and also manage the assets, the physical assets that belong to California, the gold and silver. So those are things that the state assembly is going to have to face up to at a certain point, just like you're going to have to look at, we have all of these riches and wealths. I mean, California is immensely wealthy. It has huge, huge mineral deposits. It's got tons of water aquifers. It's got oil deposits that haven't even begun to be tapped. All of those natural resources actually belong to the people who live in California, not to anybody else. And so, this whole infrastructure has to be built up to manage all of that responsibly. But the immediate need of many Californians is just to get relief from public debt, which they don't owe. And you're going to be in a position to hand out the cards that give people the power to discharge their debts directly. We've been fighting this whole battle with the SIA, the Sign in America program, and we've had some success and we've had a lot of failures, but we've brought forward the claims that are based upon the public law. And that has finally resulted in admission that, yes, they do owe us this. And so the best way to handle that, instead of having to go through a bureaucracy, is to set up a vendor account and everybody have their own card.
Christina, I'm going to let you take over this question because as a treasurer, you've got some more.
You following on with the questions?
I'm kind of getting lost here with the questions because we just jumped to Sign in America for a second.
That's okay. So in regards to the banking, Anna, one of the things we were finding out was, or wondering as far as who the bank officers are going to be. Is that something that's going to be On what levels? I mean, is that gonna, Nancy, is that?
Yeah, well, we still don't, like, we don't know who anybody is at the federal level. You know what I mean? On California, we're lucky because we've got some of them, the people that live next to us, so we know them. But
well, let me introduce you to Harold here, who is the bank steward for the American States and Nations Bank. Here he is.
Hey, boss.
Well, hello.
Hi.
Nice to meet you.
My name's Harold Hines. I happen to live in Alaska. I've been helping Anna as the boss for over 6 years on this work. And one of the questions you asked that I'd love to answer is, what do we need to help? It's real easy. Send me the names of 3 people that we can absolutely trust. Because again, I'm not interested in anybody got a little bit about the edges. I need people that we can absolutely trust. And there's only a few of us, frankly, right now. And so even adding 3 from one state would be a huge help. Okay. And you've got to, I lived in California for a while. You got the talent. Okay. It's just that a lot of the people don't necessarily fit the mold of being interested in the Federation succeeding. Okay. We need some people that believe in we the people. Okay. What Anna wrote a while back, a little book called You Know Something's Wrong When, if you'll go back and read it, read the big print, not the fine print, read the big print. And what you'll see is it's a long recitation of the evils. Okay, and there's lots of them. And if you turn the pages and you don't see them, you're not paying attention. But then if you go to the back, the very little part at the back is the claim. That's the document that went to the World Court. And it sets forth all those complaints very legally. It sets forth all the relief we seek. It's called Give Me It Back. Okay, I want it all back and more, frankly, if you got it. Okay, and what we have there basically is the start, and what you all represent and I represent and everything is frankly sort of almost like a living Declaration of Independence. Okay, because the Declaration of Independence, if you go back and read the structure of it, again, they were breaking away. We're not breaking away. We're coming back. Okay, we're back is the saying there. But the idea is simply one of realizing the Declaration of Independence said, you have given us great offense and we're going by George. Okay, and then it went through the body of that document is a recital of all the things he had done wrong. Okay, you know, you taxed us, you did this, you did that. It's a long, long list. It's all the document. And then the last paragraph finally says, oh, yeah, and by the way, we really mean it and get out of our life and we want to do this right and we're going to figure out how to do it. And that's where we are right now, is a Declaration of Independence in a living sense, because we've done parts of it. But the part is that we don't have the signatures at the bottom. And if you think back to the Declaration of Independence, there's 54 signatures on the bottom. One of them is a little larger than the rest, but there's 54 from 13 colonies that never agreed with anything of each other. Never. There is no history anywhere where the 13 all raised their hand together other than signing that document. Everybody that was in the room signed the document. Okay, and they knew at that moment that they were subject to being hung by the king. They knew what they had done was a truly, absolutely traitorous act, and they were going to die if the king ever got a hand on them. Okay, but 54, everybody in the room signed it. It was unanimous. And you know how many ever in the history play out of that, a thing called the Revolutionary War and so on? Do you know how many of them ever reneged on that signing? 0. Okay, so I know where we got a few folks laying around here that have signed the document. Okay. I need some more people that are prepared to come at this from the point of view, we're going to do the right thing in terms of we the people. And there's a lot of other distractions and there's a lot of other stuff going on, but we're not going to look at that. We're going to put our energy into the we the people has to come out on top of this deal. And that's the whole trick. And that means we got to work in a lot of different areas. Some of them we're comfortable in, some of them we're not. Okay, that's it, boss.
I want to read a little something from the affidavit. Something is wrong when an affidavit of probable cause. 261. This is like the second to the last paragraph of the affidavit. We solemnly affirm that this affidavit is true and confirmed by abundant public records and corroborating testimony beyond reasonable doubt. And we present it for the good of mankind and in the public interest and for the recoupment of property and controlling interests rightfully owed to us and our countrymen by the federal United States and the colluding international banking cartels and the governmental services corporations and municipal corporate franchises that have violated our trust and their contracts and for no other reason or purpose.
Oh, and to answer your question on banking, okay, in this case, I am acting as the steward of the ASN Bank, American States and Nation Bank, okay, and that doesn't mean I know anything about banking. I don't even have to operate the bank or anything. I have one simple authority. I can fire anybody who works at the bank. Okay, so if you come to grips with it in a sense, I can get the attention of anybody I need to on the bank side, and it will do what it's supposed to do, which is, again, provide a door that we the people can get out of it what we want. And there's different people going to have different things, but Anna's outlined to you the most wonderful thing we can do is provide a place where you can walk in and is easier than getting a driver's license, get a card that is prepaid credit and make mortgage go away, make utility bill go away, make taxes go away. And wow, all of a sudden I got a fortune, instead of being broke, all of a sudden I'm rich with cash.
Well, and this is relief. It's not welfare, but it is relief to the people who have been enslaved and worked and imposed upon for generations. I mean, this is an inheritance, okay? And it was gained, it was compiled by illegal means, which means that we have to be very careful about how it is actually released. But it does belong to our country and to our people. And everybody has the basic right to claim these exemptions and to claim the prepaid credit and the offset, which creates the exemption. And, I just wanted to look at Appendix A here, the United Colonies of America today, because it all started out as United Colonies and it went through all sorts of paginations that we don't even realize now to become United States, estates, see? And one of the things it describes here, the continental United States is the 50 nation states. The nations are the people, okay? You can have multiple nations in the same physically defined state, but we have 50 nation states and we call them Californians, Virginians, Michiganders, state of Mainers, we got all these different people that are nations and we have 50 of them that we recognize as state populations. Then we have 57 inchoate states. Some of you heard Mr. Obama say we have 57 states and A lot of people were standing around pointing fingers at him and accusing him of being stupid. No, he knew exactly what he was saying. There are 57 inchoate states. And then we have 185,000 municipal corporations in this country. And they make up another entire organizational component of the government. And finally, we have millions of public transmitting utilities. Now you're going to sit there and you're going to scratch your head and you're going to say, how could we have millions of public transmitting utilities? Because we immediately think of public transmitting utilities as the electric company, the water company, what we think of as public utilities, right? And it's true that we have a lot of those, but not millions, right? It's because we have been redefined as public transmitting utilities in the regional government scheme. They keep redefining us. They keep putting new labels on us. They keep finding some excuse to redefine us. And that's how they've made all their money and kept all their control all these years. Right now, they're pushing a transhuman agenda. Everybody who's getting vaccinated, they're saying, oh, well, you're not really a human anymore. You're a transhuman because this little bit of patented genetic material has been added to your genome. And transhumans have no rights. This is a way of denying your rights and converting you into a slave status. And they are doing it thinking that they're going to get away with it. And we're not going to know what they did. But we do know what they did, and we do know why they're doing it. So if you look at this, first of all, we started out as people, right? And then all of a sudden the buzzword was human rights, right? Well, guess what the new buzzword is going to be? Transhuman rights. All right. But in fact, at every stage of this, you're losing something. You're losing something very vital and something very important, which are your natural and unalienable rights, which are guaranteed by the constitutions of this country. And that is what we have to hold on to, because human rights are built off of those natural and unalienable rights. We call them civil rights, right? But civil rights are privileges granted to you by government and can be taken away from you by government. That's what human rights are about. They're civil rights conferred upon you. And if it goes to the next level of transhuman rights being discussed, it will be even further removed and it will be even more arbitrary. You know, whoever is in power, whatever despot there is, will be able to say, well, transhumans can only go to church once every other week, and then it's firmly discouraged. You know, transhumans can only go to these schools. It'll be the basis of a whole new elitism and a whole new division of humanity into subclasses and classes. Another whole nightmare that these people are trying to promote and promulgate. And it's up to us to hold the line and stop them dead in their tracks.
Assemble, right? Just assemble,
Right.
assemble, and take it back. Take the power back.
Right, and we've already moved to make it illegal for them to bring forward any commercial claims against GMO humans. So we're already on the board. We're already fighting that battle, and we're already saying no American, whether or not they got the injection, is a transhuman by virtue of you foisting off your patented bit of DNA or RNA, whatever. See, they have this patent on this thing, and they think that they're going to own the people that have been injected with this stuff as slaves, as transhumans. Oh, forget it. You're no longer human. You're a transhuman. we added a new label. And we have this little bit of patented DNA, and we're going to exercise our patent on you. In a pig's eye, you are. But still, this is the kind of game they play. This is the kind of thing they do. And we have to be on our toes and ready to reply to that every single day that we live. We cannot let them get away with it.
Thank you, Anna. Totally agree. I feel compelled to get us back on course because we still have questions here. Christina, are you?
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Are you good, Christina? Do you have more questions?
I'm good on that point. Yep.
Okay. So
Nancy, could I just?
Yeah.
The other thought, I'm sorry, I feel bad if I didn't tell the Golden State that you're not talking about the elephant in the room. And we have a separate group right now that's looking at the idea of assembly relationship with county. And I can tell you without giving away any secret that California suffers the same issue as a few other very highly populated states, which is you have one county or one locale that is a big, big part of the state. And how an assembly process of old handles that process is kind of challenging. Okay, so that's something you need to think about. That's all I'm saying. Okay. The other part I will tell you, though, is one of the secrets this group will discover as we talk about it more privately and in good context of discussion. One of the things we will discover is that some people may have something that actually looks like a solution in your state's case or my state's case or whatever. And there is no prohibition against these assemblies offering new alternatives in parallel with the past. In other words, you don't have to take down the past to incorporate, for instance, in Alaska, we have very few boroughs. They're called, instead of counties, we call them boroughs. But the difference is we have classes of them, class 1, class 2, class 3, and they have different abilities to regulate things and do things. But they also are much more modern in that they include structures that are very strongly we the people. And again, those kind of ideas that I've just outlined there, those are not incompatible with and could exist in parallel with even your legislature right now. I mean, whatever your legislature looks like, I don't care. You can have structures at an assembly level that look very well fit in parallel. And sooner or later, the best guy is going to win, is the way I look at it. And if there's a better idea, it will rise to the top.
Well, and we do have our counties here in Alaska. The boroughs are municipal structures.
Right.
And, you know, we just have to keep in mind what these different levels are and what they rationally have some authority on, and hold our own, hold our counties and our land and soil jurisdiction. The other things are somewhat arguable. I mean, as you can see, there are actual amendments to the constitutions that talk about this. The 10th Amendment, for example, reserving all of the things that are not expressly delegated to the states and the people. We have a lot of leeway there that we can use to help define and label them instead of sitting around and letting them label us.
And some of the constitutions of the late joiners, like Alaska, okay, have provisions that actually go beyond the federal guarantee, for instance, in terms of the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights here is actually stronger than in the national sense. And in the municipality I happen to live in also has, as part of its charter, a Bill of Rights that's even stronger than the states. Mm-hmm. So there's no prohibition as you doing a better job of dealing with we the people stuff.
Excellent.
You know, it's just your creativity. There's lots of ideas out there. And frankly, if you look a little bit, you will find people that are willing to talk about it.
Excellent.
Well, and going forward, once we get reestablished, there will be opportunities. You're going to have to choose delegates to attend a Continental Congress. And at that Continental Congress, many things will be discussed about going forward. I mean, is it really rational for us to have a trustee relationship with Great Britain at this point in our lives and the life of our country? You know, these are things that have to be hashed out both in the country and with other foreign powers.
Okay, great. Great. I'm going to move back. Totally changing the subject. That was great. No, I hear that. And I know that that's what those groups, I think we have 5 people in California that are part of that group working on the counties. So they're going to bring that back to us. That's great. I'm going to go back in because Deborah specifically had this question for you and I wanted to bring it to you. Back to the Sign in America. So Terry, I'm going to read from Deborah what she wrote. Terry has said that in order to get vendor cards, each county needs to have a Sign in America rep. First of all, we want to know if that's indeed required. And if it is, it seems that advance work should be done to notify the counties because being a Sign in America rep you have to take some legwork there to get it done. You're looking kind of strange. So is that, before I even go on, is there a direct relationship between these vendor cards and Sign in America?
Well, Sign in America has been doing the same function and with more or less success to get these debts offset, you see. And the offset under the new program for Sign in America would be to issue these vendor cards. Now, maybe Terry is thinking that we need that at a county level. But actually, what we can do is for everybody who's in the assembly right now, all 1,132 members, we can take their thumbprint from their process to get a state credential card and apply that to their vendor card and ship them off in the mail, just like a credit card comes to you in the mail.
Thank you for that clarity.
That's helped. I think I can get rid of the rest of the question.
Yep, that clarifies it all. Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Anna.
You just moved it through a quarter of a page. It was great. And so I'm not going to bring up any more Sign in America. I think that's good. So, and we talked about the master plan, and we're gonna wait for funding. We're gonna just do what we've been doing, but we're not going to do the master plan yet. And so that the master plan included the elections in November. So we're holding those off. We're going to stay with our interim. And we do have a promotional website, de jure for sure. And we might still implement that. The assembly will decide tomorrow night. And that's more of a marketing. That's more of a marketing of a de jure versus a de facto. And
Amen.
We might want to keep that up. So now we're going to move on to information technology. And there's a lot of questions here from Diva. I'm going to read these and stop me when you're feeling like you need to stop me. Are you aware that California, was gifted an IT infrastructure solution, Zendesk, with 10,000 licenses, capable of allowing us to scale up to serve millions to tens of millions of people, something that cannot be done with our current Federation IT infrastructure. And we would love to show that to you if you are interested in that.
Well, of course I'm interested. I'm interested in anything that can help populous states, basically deploy fast enough to help the millions of people that you have to help. I mean, California is not Wyoming.
Right. Okay. Veteran county IT people and state IT people maintain their own county websites, hosting and contact lists and social media accounts for their state and their counties. We would like the Federation and Federation IT team to clarify if they have any requirements or expectations or mandates or standards or rules or that they want the state and the county IT to follow so that we can be compliant if there is anything.
Well, I think it's just a matter of common sense that the counties should be working together and try to come up with some sort of a common format so that people who are going to the net and looking for, say, Santa Clara County can just plug that in. There it is. And, you know, somebody who's looking for one of the other counties, Humboldt County, you know, there it is. And here's the place for you guys to talk about your county and, you know, ask your questions and interact with your state. There should be a link for every county. There should be a link back to the state assembly so that people get the idea that there's, you know, there's a county assembly, there's a state assembly, there's, you know,
Right.
and start interacting that way with the social media and outreach.
Do you have any vision of what that looks like between the state and the federation? Is it, I mean, just to be generous, and obviously we include TASA website on ours, and we're just a generous relationship, but there's no sort of, as we're assembling, right? Is there any sort of mama bear requirement or request of our IT to share database, to have any sort of hosting or any, I mean, I don't know the technology, the IT terms to use with you, but do you have anything that you would like us to be compliant with in any way?
Nancy, again, I'm not an expert, but I can tell you that that's a question of the past. I mean, I'm sorry, the real technology that will be deployed, for instance, this credit card or prepaid credit card that she described to you, I bet you think you know what that looks like. You're wrong.
A black card?
All right. It doesn't look anything like what you're thinking. It is much cooler. You know, imagine gluing a couple cell phones together and then putting a card or two and a driver's license on the back. And all of a sudden you're starting to get the image of what we're talking about in terms of technology. The bank that we're going to be involved in. I'm sorry, we're not buying any bricks. Nope. You know,
okay, but
we'll have kiosk type setups.
Well, I think of this, and I think,
but they don't even have to be in a bank. Wait a minute. Look at what you do at the cash register at the grocery store, for God's sakes.
Right. So when I think about you handing out vendor cards,
Bango.
When you hand out vendor cards, are you using a list? Are you expecting us to provide you a list? Are you going to go to the LRS?
We want a list of all the people in California who are eligible. And as most as we can get, we want those thumbprint images for those people downloaded onto a file so that we can just hand it over to the bank and say, okay, these people are all qualified, they are all Americans, they're all inheritors, and they all get a vendor card.
Okay, great. And that's for us to give you, and we'll do it by county, because that's where people live. Okay.
Again, Nancy, look, at some point, the commercial bank has to offer individuals services that are not dissimilar to what you're thinking about in terms of banking's perform. But the difference with this corporate bank is it likes people. It doesn't like corporations. It's not looking for corporate accounts. It doesn't care. It don't want any part of them. It wants people, real people. And so it's going to provide those services in a different way than you're thinking about it, number one. And number two, the flow of the relationship with the Federation and everything else is very clear. There's a reason we called it the American States and Nation Bank. Okay, there's a lot in that name that means something, and that's the focus on we the people. And again, it may be Native people, it may be Californians, it may be whatever, okay? But that focus is going to be there, and you bet we're going to integrate. We may not be a marketing company, but we're smart enough to integrate all the information we have gathered and have on people, and more importantly, that people want included in the package.
Right. Because you're going to want a vendor card. I guarantee you're going to want a vendor card. Okay. And that vendor card can serve as your passport. It can
Right.
serve as your state ID. It can
Driver's
serve as your
license.
driver's license or travel card, you know, depending on whether you need a driver's license for commercial business or not. It can serve as all of your other cards, all your other credit cards can be loaded onto this one card. I mean,
Yeah.
and it's absolutely theft and hack proof.
So,
Okay, perfect. Now we just
so
have
who cares? Because if we can't deliver that, we will go find somebody who can deliver something better than that. And I mean, this is a wide open game as long as we the people focused is here.
And as long as it's honest and transparent. We
Perfect.
need it to be lawful. We need it to be legal also.
Right.
We need it to be open. And we need it to be handled as a public function.
Right.
And, you know, one of the big debates is just because you're serving in the armed services, or just because you are employed by the post office or some other federal organization, doesn't mean you're not an American. It doesn't mean that you're not owed an inheritance, right? It's a separate issue. So, you know, you're going to have a lot of other people coming in who are state nationals of one species or another, you know, either municipal employees or dependents or territorial employees or dependents. And somehow one of the big things, one of the big challenges of the assemblies, and I'm sure for California, is being able to sort out who's who, you know, who stands in which political status. Do these people actually belong in this assembly, or do they belong in a district assembly? You know, should they go down the street to the municipal assembly? And when it comes to this inheritance, do they get full benefits like everybody else because they're Americans? Well, part of our whole problem is that we've been treating these employees as slaves and as indentured servants. And that's something way back in the past. That it hasn't even been legal since 1926. So we have a lot of issues that we have to resolve about how we treat our employees. And all of these things are coming forward at the same time. So, you know, how are we going to treat City of Los Angeles employees? They were born here, you know.
We're gonna educate them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this will mean a great coming together and an end of slavery and indentured servitude, both, throughout our entire country.
That's great.
And actually, this is what should have happened after the Civil War. Immediately after the Civil War, all of this stuff should have ended. But they managed to get a claw hold, you know, and work it. They used legal chicanery to maintain the abolishment of slavery on one hand and the public enshrinement of slavery on the other. Well, this time we're wiser. We've seen how they work. We know what they do and how they do it. And this time when their little claw comes up and tries to grab hold, we're going to go, and they're not going to be able to do that anymore. Not to anybody, not for any reason, not to transhumans either. You know, we're just not going to put up with it. And so when we go through this, we have lots of questions of a moral issue kind.
Right.
You know, are we going to finally, once and for all time, put an end to slavery and indentured servitude in the public sector?
Excellent. Excellent. Well, let's move on. Relating in honor. Okay. Matt, you had a question. Are you ready?
Yes. Yes. I want to start out by thanking you, Anna. This is extremely productive for the morale of our assembly. I mean, my morale is already up. You are so loved and respected that your words have extreme power. With that being said, there have been a couple Monday nights where we've heard some negative things about California. And so I have a request in the future, if it's possible, if anything comes up negative at all, I think like what we're doing here tonight is extremely, extremely positive and productive. And because we're so respected and your words are so powerful, that when we heard some negative stuff, it really affected the momentum and the morale. So my request is if we can have a Zoom meeting, if this ever happens again, or get together like we're doing right now, because it's just, I think it's so important for where we're headed. And I just want to confirm there was something in writing mentioning secessionists and comparing us in Texas to the Colorado 9 years ago. So I just want to make sure that we're all good and there's nothing we need to worry about. So we can either stop there, or I've got a couple other questions.
Well, there are a couple of things that California had problems with early on that I'm aware of. And one of them was trying to treat the assembly as a private club, what's called a private member association. And really an assembly is a public institution and it can't be handled as a private club. You can't do secret meetings. The closest thing to a secret meeting that an assembly can have is the International Business Assembly. And that's only because the people that are eligible to vote on those issues are just state citizens. Okay, so it's not really a secret meeting at all, and the results of what they do are public, but it's just because you've got two populations, and one can vote on international issues and the other can't because of conflicts of interest. But otherwise, all the meetings are supposed to be open to discussion and to free flow of information. And it's kind of a hard thing because there's a natural human desire to want to control things and want to keep some things secret. And unfortunately, secrecy is a two-edged sword. And when you allow secrecy, you wind up with situations that are evil being sprouted in secret and then having to deal with it afterward. And so even though it's difficult to maintain that transparency and that openness, we need to.
Thank you. Again, a couple more questions. We used to have the chat during your Monday night meetings where we were able to talk between states, between all across the country. Eliminating the chat keeps people from making connections with other states and enforces more of a top-down system where only, that the chairman and lead coordinators of each state hold the connections. Terry Som being the only speaker also limits the entire country from being able to hear from a coordinator from each state that has questions for you that directly relate to their state. So would it be possible to have a different coordinator be represented for a new state each week so that we can get a better scope of the country and what they're focused on and learn what they want to be doing by seeing how their assemblies are forming? So there seems to be a control over information and connections that can be eliminated and remedied immediately by addressing those two things. So
we do have a coordinators meeting every Sunday, and I drop into that as often as I can and answer questions. So we do have that goes on. You might not be aware of it, but we do that. I think maybe there's an impression that Terry is hogging the camera light or the limelight. It's actually because she has to run the network. And so, we could possibly have like a guest sort of situation where, for example, the California coordinators come on as a team and, talk about what's going on in their state and ask questions one week. And then the coordinators from Tennessee come in and report on what's happening in Tennessee and what are the issues for Tennessee this week. And that could, spawn a lot of insight and interaction on a bigger scale. The reason the chat room went away is because WebEx doesn't support a chat room. And the reason that we had to go to WebEx is Zoom becomes really expensive when you start getting above 500 people. And so we went to WebEx because it was friendlier to a large audience.
Yeah, Matt, look, again, we've become victims of the computer thinking, okay? In this case, I'm going to go the other way with you. Why don't we go back? I remember working in big companies that somehow every couple weeks, you got a paragraph from a number of different areas within the company, and they told you at least what in a major sense they were working on or had accomplished or whatever thing you want. So all you need to do that, frankly, in this day and age is email and an editor. And the editor, you just got to give them the power to draw the line through stuff if it's inappropriate or frankly too mundane, let's put it that way. But that's a way for people to share. And if you're given a chance to put something out to the other people, that's starting to get pretty transparent. And that it kind of opens up doors, especially if the commenter has an email address at the bottom of what they say. I mean, I can tell you my email is heinz.harold@gmail.com, and that's HEINZE. And I mean, you can send me an email anytime you want, okay? Doesn't mean I'm going to do anything with it, but you can certainly send it out to me. And if it's good stuff, I'm not proud. I'll use it. And there's lots of other people out there that do the same thing. There's a lot of assemblies looking for ideas.
And help.
That's why I thought the chat was so helpful, where we could actually communicate with across the country during
I know. But you see, there's nothing that prohibits 2 people or 3 people or 9 people, if they have each other's emails, of establishing a conversation.
Right.
I talked to high school graduates of mine from 55 years ago, okay, on the Zoom, all right? And it's because of the email contact led to that.
Well, and one of the things is, look, you have all these different, you have the Jural Assembly, for example, and within the Jural Assembly, say you set up a litigation committee. Well, as this thing grows, there's really no reason that the members of the litigation committee couldn't have a direct contact to someone from the living law firm when they have questions about how to pursue something. Yeah. And as this whole thing spools up, when you have questions about, is it proper for a General Assembly to directly address the United Nations? There are all sorts of things, even diplomatic issues that the assemblies are going to have to develop their ways and means of addressing. And these huge issues, like how do we treat our public employees? What do we expect of them? What do we demand? What do we give them back? How do we treat Americans who are working at a federal level? Huge questions, and everybody has to be involved in this kind of brainstorming effort to get to the best answers. So expediting that, certainly, Matt, is a very important part.
Yeah. And,
loss of the chat room, is there some way that we could replace that by a chat? Just instead of having, or, I think it's important the Monday night seminars bring everybody up to date with the Federation issues. That's what they're really intended to do. But there's really no reason that we couldn't have a national chat.
Telegram channel.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Anna. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Matt. Christina, did you want to take the? Christina?
I don't know if she's listening.
I don't know if she's listening. Christina?
Hi.
Your turn, honey. Christina? We don't hear you.
She's muted, I think.
Show. Now it shows movement.
She's saying, we can't
Oh,
hear
lovely.
you. We can't hear you.
We've lost contact.
Butt in if you figure it out, Christina. I'm gonna move on here. So Matt just touched on some of these other things, and I think that the big thing for us, Anna, is I know in my seat, I consider myself the biggest public servant in California. I have to serve everybody, and when we get thrown under the bus, I get calls. Who are the insurrectionists? Who are the secessionists? Who's the insurrectionists? Who, what's going on? Why is she saying that? And I have no idea. I have no idea why you're saying things. And I think the key there is, I just want to make sure that you have other voices, that me, Michelle, Satya's voices are with you and being heard, because I feel like that's a missing piece. For me, it's a missing piece. And I would like to bridge that.
We definitely recorded certain quote unquote secret meetings that were taking place in California that were not appropriate. I mean, they just plain out now were not appropriate. And they seemed to indicate that there was not only a misunderstanding of the role of the Federation and the nature of the Federation, and kind of mixing up the Federation with the federal government, but also things that were addressed at a kind of a backward thinking from the corporate world. Yeah. The corporatist model doesn't work in an assembly. An assembly is supposed to work as a community. It's supposed to work based on committees. And what we were getting was this very almost vicious top-down, we're going to control this, and we're going to, put all of our people in place, and we're going to force this to be what we want it to be. And it was just this small group of people that were promoting this. And it's a gross misunderstanding to think that a state assembly, a public institution, is supposed to be run like a corporation. It's not. It has a completely different structure. And it is not a top-down structure. It's an inclusive structure where all the different functions get done by committees. And, at the beginning, those committees may have only 2 people. You might only have 1 person at some point working on a committee subject, a project, But there was a definite movement there in California at the time I said that, and we were well aware of it, that indicated that people, at least some people in the leadership at that point, were going toward the secret meetings, the top-down structure, the kind of political manipulation to try to get just their friends and their cronies in positions, and that they were blaming the Federation for things that were actually, if you want to be brutally honest about it, actually problems of the assembly that didn't have anything to do with us, but we were responsible for in terms of ensuring the honesty of the treasurer functions and the money issues. Because you can't have people going around giving, in some cases, $8,000, $10,000, $15,000 to the California Assembly effort and then have no accountability to show for it. And so we became concerned, and we basically became aware that there were efforts underway in California to kind of promote the corporate model instead of the assembly model. And we have the same problem, by the way. It's not just California by any stretch, but we fight the same battle with many of the assemblies because, let's face it, we all came from a corporate model background. This is what we're used to. This is what we grew up with. This is what we were trained to participate in, is a corporate model. And so, there's a deep indoctrination toward the corporate model, toward the top-down, compartmentalized. Everybody has their function, and you just work like cogs and wheels, right? But that's not the American way. The American way is to work as a community and to work together on a committee basis to solve problems. And so we're trying to teach an entirely new, for us, model of community working together. And it's a real battle because new people come into the assemblies and they bring the corporate model with them. And they don't even realize there's anything different about the assembly. So they get into an assembly and they start building the corporate model they're familiar with. And it's almost like, on one hand, you don't want to tell them that they're bad or they're wrong because from their perspective, they don't know anything else. And it's hard to get them tuned into a new way of doing things. And you don't want to discourage them. But, at the other hand of it, if we just let that go on, what happens is they wind up rebuilding the same old monster we're trying to get away from. We want to get away from corporate feudalism. We don't want a corporate structure. We want to find ways to organize that are community-based and that are egalitarian and that honor and respect and care for each individual, because our government, unlike the corporate government, is focused on the individual. Right. So, the big difference between our government and both of their governments is that our government is supposed to be focused on each individual and on their rights and on taking care of them and on taking care of the people. So
we would like to start anew, and we would just like to ask that going forward, that if you are aware of those things, that you come to us first before it's reported out on to the nation. That's all we're asking for.
Okay, well, see, now I was astounded that nobody knew that they could just get in contact with me directly and didn't have to go through Terry.
What was your number again, Anna?
Yeah, I couldn't find your number. So anyways, we'll put it in the chat.
Hasn't changed in quite a while.
Is it literally on the book?
That's funny. That's funny.
And Kara,
you win. You win, Anna. You got that one.
Yeah.
And my telephone number has been blatted all over the internet for years, but it's 907-250-5087.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, do we want to move forward? We've got a big, the last of this is has to do with our relationship with Terry, and then the Wayne Paul situation at the end here with some miscellaneous things. So
speak up a little bit.
Well, I don't think it's for me. Dawn, do you want to take over?
Yes, but I just want to say one more thing about the last topic. I just want to be clear. So when you wrote, or someone using your name wrote on Facebook recently that Texas had been disbanded, and you were also going to take apart California, close the assembly and disband it because somebody wrote in and said they couldn't get an answer from us. So instead of telling that person how to contact us, like go to californiaassembly.com, you simply said, yes, California is terribly disorganized and I'm going to disband them, just like I did Texas. Did you write that?
No.
Or is somebody using your name? That's when, honestly, we hit the switch and said, that's it. We've got to talk to you and figure out who's talking to you and why you're writing these things.
No, I didn't say that.
Well, somebody on Facebook using your name did.
Don, there's pretty good sort of anecdotal information, I'll use that word, that Anna's account has been hacked over. It's shown up in other ways, let's put it that way.
Thank you. We really needed to know that. We all did. And I'm sorry to be so blunt, but I really just needed to know. Does not sound like you feel that way based on everything tonight, but I wanted to make it really clear. And thank you for answering that.
No, and I wouldn't put it that way. You know, I wouldn't say something like that, really.
Okay, great.
That's,
So this is now the question I was going to ask. How do we get clear instructions without hearing them through Terry? And actually, I kind of feel like you've answered that tonight, but are you in full approval of everything Terry says on your behalf as the Federation representative you chose? And, you know, stop me when I'm going to kind of say everything and then you can answer it all if it's all right with you, unless you want to stop me. Are you aware of everything Terry is saying on your behalf? How do we file grievances against Terry so that we know you're aware of conflicting, destructive, or divisive instructions passed to our assembly from the Federation? How are you verifying the information you get about California? For example, the meeting we had, which you may barely remember, and it was my first time, by the way, listening to you, Anna. I heard you about 10 years ago, and I decided to join this assembly. And on my very first night, I went to the Los Angeles Assembly meeting, and I immediately got online and listened to you. And my first call was that one. And you actually Terry quoted some things that had been said in the meeting the hour before. They were totally handled by the meeting. They were all discussed. It had to do with the use of the words about bylaws. And Terry asked you, and you said, "Oh yes, California's at it again." And then then I guess you were tired and you went on and on about Californians you knew and how all Californians needed to be, restructured, and there was something wrong with their brains from the way they were taught in school. And I remember listening and I kept thinking, you're kidding. I have been all over the United States and I have met these kind of people in every state, not just California. And then you said we'd have to be really gentle with Californians because we had to gently adjust their brains, and et cetera. It was a long talk. It was quite a long talk that you gave. And, for me as a brand new person on the assembly, it was the wrong night to tune into you. But I had to wonder, and I still do wonder, how did you know, who told you about a little nothing in our assembly discussion that was immediately handled without any rancor? And how did you just answer Terry like that as a knee jerk? Oh yes, Californians at it again. I don't understand is somebody talking in your ear? Because usually when that kind of thing happens, it's because somebody is whispering in your ear in a negative way. Some sort of angry person has your ear, and I don't know who it is, but that's what it seemed like. And I just wondered, are you verifying whatever information you get about California? Because here's what we were left with as a group. We started to suspect there were some saboteurs within the California Assembly that were giving false and slanted information to you somehow through Terry, because Terry's the one that said that on your national program. Oh, I hear California is talking about bylaws. And, anyway, there was this whole snide thing about it. So I don't understand who is talking to you. How did you know an hour later?
well, I wind up being kind of spy central. Whether I want that role or not, everybody always reports to me. And perhaps that's a good thing, because it's enabled us to avoid some very serious bad things happening. We've been able to stay ahead of some of the manipulations of both the British territorial and the municipal government as a result. And we've been able to protect our people from, for example, the extra agenda that was going on in Texas with the militias acting out of school and trying to disband the Continental Congress or Continental Marshall Program and others. What happens with California is that California has the North and the South, and it also has the East and the West. It has the Republican and it has the Democratic traditions very strongly ingrained. And all of this is part of a system that grew up after the Civil War. And so when you have a society that is quite polarized, surprisingly so, but quite polarized by political party spectrum and by indoctrination in the corporatist model, which dominates everything in the larger cities, especially in LA, you wind up with a situation where there's a constant need to educate and re-educate and educate and keep people thinking about these issues. And there are always these little splinter groups that go off and do things that are harmful. And so on that particular occasion, we had a whole group of different assemblies. And as it turned out, California was just the most recent, discussing the idea of setting up bylaws. And bylaws are a peculiarly corporate thing. Assemblies don't have bylaws. No. And corporations do. So I guess it was just the straw that broke the camel's back of having to go all over this country and explain that, no, we don't have bylaws. And I had two groups, one in Northern California and one in Southern California, both trying to splinter off and do the corporate thing again. And it's not the first time that that's happened. It probably won't be the last. Realistically, the corporate model is very, very strong. And it tries to worm its way back in. I can't hardly describe to you all the different ways. We just had, there was the discussion about having bylaws. Today it was trying to sign on to a state charter. Well, you know, if people realize that chartering is a corporate function and that we're not incorporated and don't want to be incorporated, they wouldn't even be discussing it in that way. You see how that happens?
Well, kind of, but let's say that our assembly, which at the time it was, and I was brand new, I didn't realize the scope of the problem. But let's say that our assembly was being completely dominated by 4 people at every single meeting, at every single topic, and absolutely nothing could ever be voted on, nothing could be discussed, the agenda could not be accomplished because 4 people occupied 90% of the time talking all the time. And let's say that we decided maybe we could set up something that would be a structure. But do you think that teaches us in an assembly how to do it by shaming us on national talks? I don't understand how that's constructive.
Well, it wasn't constructive in terms of showing you what to do. It was definitely a slap in the face for what not to do. But part of it is that it wasn't directed toward you. It was directed toward certain specific people who knew who they were, who were engineering this in the background. They were actually striving to take the California Assembly off the tracks. They were trying to turn you into another corporation. And, you know, if we allow them to succeed at that, then they just rebuild the same old monster. And we wind up with something that is not sovereign, that is not able to protect its people, that is just another dog-eat-dog corporation that has its nicely compartmentalized little structure and where everybody is harmed. And so I react rather strongly when I see the corporatists at work. Now, and some of this is not even conscious. I realize that some of it isn't conscious because people have grown up in the corporate model, and that's what they do because it's all that they know. And they're not thinking about it in terms of what are alternatives. What do we have in terms of the human past where we've operated on different assumptions and used different structures than the corporate model? And that's something you have to learn over time. That's something everybody has to learn, has to think about it.
Anna?
And in the meantime, I'm just trying to keep this all alive and going and fast forwarding so that we have the time and the chance to do that. As it turned out, the people that were doing this in California left. They went to the district assembly. God bless them. I pointed out this was what they needed to do. And they just went, and now they're happy. I heard from them last week. They're like pigs in slop. They went to the district assembly and they're in the midst of a corporate milieu and they're politicking with the Republicans and the Democrats, and they're home. And they're still aware that they're Americans, which is the good part of that whole interaction. Because before that, they weren't thinking of themselves as Americans. They were thinking of themselves as US citizens only. And now they have a different perspective and they're friendly toward us, and they realize the difference, and they realize that they're happier and more at home with the district assembly. But they still realize who we are, and they still support what we're doing. It's just not for them. Okay?
Don, I listened to you, and I believe your sensitivity to what's said about you as Californians is very reasonable, what you've reflected, okay? I think that's very reasonable. I think I guess the point I would make on the other side of it is that we haven't been very creative in how to deal with some bad situations. If we've waited too long in a couple of cases, we've gotten ourselves in such a box that the best thing would have been just to go in there with a shotgun, frankly, and get it over with. And maybe the people that were going to ask us to provide evidence and things like that, we get them in the room too, okay? But that's not a good solution, and I'm not proposing that in any way, shape, or form. On the other hand, we have not developed, and maybe we should develop something that looks more like a go stand in the corner. And maybe we need some way to just say to each other, look, this is, we're getting kind of rocky. And why don't we both shut up for a while and think about what we're doing or not doing, and see if we can find some way to sort of sort it out. Because I will tell you that Anna speaks for herself, and she speaks very clearly and everything else. But I see a lot of stuff. I mean, it's not mine to deal with, but I see it go by, and I have no editorial privilege in this deal, okay? And its duties as assigned for me. But the deal is that your sensitivity is correct, okay? I don't differ with that one iota, okay? And maybe we're just not being sensitive enough to your sensitivities, and I'll accept that, okay? And that's just, maybe we need a better solution. And maybe Don, you and I could work out some way where if you go like this, that means, could we talk?
No, it's okay. Actually, this is working everything out for me. And by the way, I honestly don't think I'm speaking for myself. I can tell you this hit the assembly like an atom bomb. And unfortunately, we never addressed it because people felt going to you and saying what we felt was somehow wrong. And therefore, it just has been festering really for more than 2 months. So this talk is important because, I'm fine with everything that happened. I think we just needed to kind of say how we felt when that happened and have you receive it. And I feel like you're listening. I feel totally heard. And on behalf of the whole assembly, I'm deeply grateful to you that you've been willing to have this talk, because of that, plus the Facebook, for us as an assembly, as a whole group, it we really needed to talk to you in person. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. And I yield.
Michelle, did you want to go? You're muted, honey.
You're still muted.
Thank you. So sorry, I'm camping. Hi, everybody. Hi, Anna. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. So I'm Michelle Ford, and I'm the LA County coordinator. I'm also one of the co-coordinators for the entire state. No pressure here.
No.
So first I want to say thank you, right? Because you didn't really totally know what you were stepping into tonight. And I want you to know that you have a partner in California. We are committed to fulfilling the restoration of our de jure republic form of government. And we really, really, really want to do it right. And so we look to you as a mentor, as a trusted advisor, as someone we really love and care for. And although we've had some bumps in the road and our egos have been bruised by some recent social media posts that now we know are totally fraudulent and not you at all. I really want you to know that I hope that tonight is the beginning of a really great relationship with the Federation, because, I, for one, I'm trying to do everything by the book, because by your book, not just your book, but I mean like the book, our founding fathers book, our Declaration of Independence. And so, I teach a class every Thursday, and I'm stringing people along that are brand new to this idea of being self-governing.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish I read your book in 2015. Frankly, it would have saved me 6 years. But anyway, I digress. My point is, I see tonight as a line of demarcation where we get to put past, drama, hurt, whatever, we have, the best analogy that I can use is, it feels like there's an hourglass that's like stuck, to the table, and that the clock is ticking in a very serious manner. In that this de facto system is aggressively, completely overstepping their boundaries. And so we are committed to making sure we do it right, but that we also move quickly. People don't have the same luxury that I had to take 6 years of doing research and finally finding your work. Some people on this assembly have been doing this for 20 and 30 and 40 years, navigating this whole system. So I guess my question for you is, what could we do in terms of partnership to make sure that we can move speedily along with integrity, with honor, and having open lines of continuous communication with you, such that we can take leaps and bounds? Because we don't have time. People's lives are really at stake. People are being muzzled and vaccinated in record numbers. And I'm so concerned about the sleeping masses. And I know that your education is the key, yet they don't have the luxury of time. It's like, how do we warp speed? I was going to say warp speed. I didn't mean that. That's been co-opted already. But like, how do we like get them quicker into our de jure form of government, such that we can shepherd in our restored government?
Well, I hate to say this because it sounds kind of cynical, or maybe as if I don't have proper faith in human nature. But the moment we start handing out the vendor cards, I think the word will get out, and all of a sudden, poof, everybody will want to be an American, and then will be highly motivated and interested. And the problem with it is that those people that come in because of the monetary aspects need to be trained and re-familiarized with their actual government as much and more as everybody else, right? It's going to be a huge educational effort. And one of the things is that when they come into our banks and credit unions, which are going to focus more on distributing prepaid credit than on issuing any credit, we want them to have to go through a training process, at least, an hour or so of getting familiarized, but hey, there's a different government here that has always been here that you weren't aware of, and it's yours. Guess what? So we need to be aware that there's going to be a giant influx of people the moment that those cards are issued. And you start using them and you start saying to your best friend, hey, I just paid my mortgage with this. I just paid my kids' college tuition with this. I just paid my property taxes with this. Can you see the antennas going up all over America? I mean, it won't take long.
It won't take long, but that's like the wrong motivator.
It's the wrong motivation. It's the wrong motivation. It's the motivation that the slave masters have used for millennia. So we have to somehow salt this down with a new understanding of what it is to be an American and the blessing that you are recouping as an American because of what our forefathers did and what they went through. And, we somehow have to inculcate this in all these new people who will be coming here for the wrong motivations. We have to somehow turn that wrong motivation into a right motivation. There has to be something to instill a sense of the suffering that went with the blessing.
Okay. You've given me some homework, so I will incorporate that into my class and into my interviews and stuff. So thank you so much. I yield.
Thank you, Michelle. We've got two hands up. Both of them are state officers. We've only let state officers speak tonight and state coordinators. I want to thank everybody, and I'm sorry if you gave us a question and we didn't get to it exactly, but we sort of had to go with the flow. It's almost 10 o'clock. We've kept everyone up a little bit too long now, and there's two more hands, so I'm going to let Satya and Caesar have the last words right now, if that's okay with everybody. So Satya, you were next.
Hi, Anna. I just wanted to say hi to you in person as a woman. I'm one of the co-coordinators on California. And I just wanted to thank you for your generosity of coming here tonight. I know you had a late night last night too, probably a really long day today. I think that this meeting was a real blessing. I really appreciate the way you answered all our questions with dignity and honor and truth. And I think this is really a good model for us for what we could do with each other going forward, to always bring everything to talk about. So I just want to really thank you. I don't have any questions. You've answered them all. Thank you.
Thank you, Satya. Caesar?
Hi, Anna. First of all, thank you for coming to our meeting. I really appreciate it. I am the recorder in California, and I have some question regarding immigration. I know you've been saying that anybody that has been in the state for over 7 years could apply to file the documents to become a state national. I have some reservation regarding this. Can you please clarify that, please?
Okay. The way that immigration was set up was that people would come into the country, they would kind of go through a vestibule or let's call it what we call an Arctic entry, okay? They would come in through the US and they would get a basic education in the government and how the government was structured. And then they would be set free to find their new home in America without any further government supervision per se. And they were all then considered US citizens. I think we've all seen the film versions of people taking their oath to preserve the constitutions and to be good American citizens, blah blah. So that's the typical route of becoming a citizen. You become a US citizen, and then you go and you decide where you're going to live, and you establish a home in a state for a year and a day, and then you are free to adopt that state, provided that you haven't taken any public assistance, like you haven't been on welfare during that year, and you haven't committed a felony during that year. Now that's the way that most people immigrated to this country. They came in through Ellis Island, or they came in through Baton Rouge, or they came in through one of the other major seaports. They applied to be US citizens, and then they went out into the country and they adopted state citizenship or state national status after they had lived in that particular state for a period of a year and a day. Most of the immigrants who came here from the 1850s, 60s, 70s onward, that's the way they came into this country. But at a certain point, after the Civil War, they stopped telling people about the additional step. Yeah. And the additional step was to publish your intention to adopt the state that you were living in. So it was a sin by omission on the part of the federal government. And as a result, most of the immigrants who came here remained in the US citizen status instead of becoming a Virginian or an Arizonan or a Minnesotan. There's a very famous court case in which a Mr. Rayum came to this country and lived here for like 18 years, something. It was a significant period of time that he was living in Minnesota. But because he never published his intention to be considered a Minnesotan, he could not invoke his constitutional rights and guarantees. And that was one of those cases that really exposed how they were avoiding and evading their constitutional obligations. And it was because people were left misinformed or uninformed, and they didn't take the extra step of publishing their intention to adopt the state that they were living in. Okay? Our government has a totally different take on immigration. The American government accepts US citizens, okay? The states accept US citizens as candidates to have state citizenship or to adopt state national status. But there are additional ways that you can become an American that don't apply to the US citizenship pathway. So what you're talking about now is the fact that the American states traditionally, on their own, without reference to the US at all, accept people who can come here and live peaceably for a period of years. So for example, if you came here from Mexico, illegally, but you came here, right? You came here from Mexico back in 1971, and you've lived here and had a job and had a family and had a house and paid electric bills and all the rest of it for all the years ever since. And yet you're still not either a US citizen or a municipal citizen of the United States. You're stateless. You don't have a state. You don't have a citizenship, really. except in terms of, you know, your birthright as a Mexican, you don't really, in the present place that you live, you don't have a status. And so the American states provided that if you had managed to come here and live for 7 years without a felony and without being on public assistance, you could apply directly to be a state, to adopt a state by publishing your intention and coming in as a bypassing the federal citizenship.
Caesar, you're muted.
Observations regarding this is the illegals, of course, but at the same time, the criminals that cross the border and, let's say, take California or Arizona to be their home state. How we're gonna manage their situation, because back in the 1800s, we didn't have so many criminals that we have nowadays in our state. How can we give them basically a credential, which is a get out of jail free card, and be responsible for those documents?
Well, if they're a criminal, they shouldn't have been here for 7 years or more with no felony record and no public assistance. And if they've managed to do that, then we have covered our due diligence by making them prove that they've been here for that number of years without having created any problems for anybody.
Or the requirements.
Okay, thank you. I yield.
Okay, Caesar, thank you. I'm not taking any more hands. Please lower your hands, everybody. Greg, go ahead.
Maybe one thing, you know, that I can say that will comfort Caesar. We've done our due diligence, and if you have any questions about somebody, if you suspect that they're actually a criminal, or that they're engaged in some sort of criminal activity, or there's any red flags about someone who applies, you can always ask for a background check to establish that they've been here and that they have no criminal record. Because it is pretty easy nowadays to get false credentials.
Right.
Assumed names. And so if you see anybody that you have any reason to think is shining you on, then we can do background checks and we can do other things to weed out any unsavory characters, because the entire idea is that we want good, productive people in this country. You know, we don't want any criminals. We don't want anybody that's trying to use the state citizenship as a escape. We don't want anybody that is violent. And we certainly don't want to advertise any benefits that people can get just by making a false claim. And there are some of those that are out there doing exactly that. So I do sympathize with the problem. And I would suggest that if you see signs of something that's wrong, or just doesn't smell right, the documentation doesn't match up, it doesn't have the right look to it, we can go further and we can actually conduct an investigation to make sure that they are who they say they are, and that they have lived here for 7 years and all the rest of it.
Thank you, Anna.
Okay. So much for taking your night out.
I think Greg still had a question.
If I may, briefly.
Okay.
Anna, thank you. I'm Greg Snegoff. I'm Justice of the Peace for Los Angeles. And at the moment, I'm on Italy. And we are constituting an assembly here in Italy on the we'll call it the California model, but on the States Assembly model. Obviously, there are changes necessary to be made to the various documents. They've been translated. They've been translated, and people with legal knowledge here are changing what needs to be changed to be in sync with the Italian legal system. Within about this last month and a half, 2 months, the registered chat members are up to over 800, so it's growing very, very quickly. They are very, very eager to be able to do something similar to what we're doing in America. As far as I have been told, we as in Italy, can use the LRS system for the international publication. This is correct, just to reiterate.
I believe you already have recording secretaries from Italy that have been trained, although you may not be connected with them.
Well, my wife, Italian national, has been asking for the training. Other than her, we are not aware of any. Nobody's come forward. There are plenty of people who want to have the training. If you know of, and if anybody knows of any that have already had it, that would be terrific. But I don't think that's the case. And she would like to be able to give that training to anyone who would like it here.
Well, I know that Brett has had several people over time who have applied and wanted to go through the training. I'm not sure that they have. I can't verify that. I just know that there are people from Italy who have applied in the past to become recording secretaries for Italy. So I will get hold of Brett and I will ask him the status, and if he has contact information for people who have gone through the course in Italy, I will somehow get it back to you. Could I ask you to send me an email so that I have your email and can transfer the information to you?
Absolutely. I'm in contact with Brett, but yes, I will send that to you right away. And the second question is obviously in regards to the Global Family Bank affiliates. We have the men and women necessary to start affiliates here. I've made a couple of requests to the Federation. So far, I haven't heard anything back. Is there a way to, Harold, maybe talk to you and start some affiliates going? We've sent the information to I think you called the forms master, regarding the statutes, to plug that information into the foreign affiliates statutes to come back and send a charter. Perhaps that information has not reached you.
No, it hasn't.
How can we expedite that?
Well, okay, I get
Lots of emails,
thousands of emails every day, and the best bet is always to just scattergun me. Send me one every hour for a day, and somewhere in there it'll show up, right?
Okay.
But,
all right.
What we do when we get those requests, we get the names and addresses of the founders of the bank and the officers and the name of the bank that you chose. And then we put it into a format and we send it back to you for signatures. And when you get that done, you distribute the copies in a specific way. You send one back, you keep the rest of them there and distribute them to the officers. And after that, there's a one-page bank treaty. It's a rarity among bank treaties, believe me, because
I'm sure
long-winded and ugly. But we have a one-page bank treaty with the Global Family Bank.
Yeah.
And so you become an affiliate with the Global Family Bank, and that immediately gives you 4 banks 2 commercial banks that can talk to each other, and 2 international trade banks. Now, as the assets go back to the global family bank, it gets distributed out to each country, right? So you'll have a component of assets that are gold and silver that belong to Italy, and you'll have a commercial credit that belongs to Italy for prepaid credit. Because every country that has a national debt also has a national credit coming, right?
They're very, very sensitive to Basel III here, probably more than we are in America. So they're very, very eager to get that safety net going.
Right, and they're right to be concerned. The Europeans in general are more aware of world history and of our situation even than we are, which is, you know, it's rather humbling when you consider that somebody from France or England is more familiar with our problem than we are, because they've lived with it longer and they've had the same basic problems. So anyway, they will then be able to issue their own card, their own vendor card, and they'll have to choose what kind of emblem they want to put on it. You know, I'm sure they'll have a specific coat of arms or a specific flag or something that means something to them as a nation. They can use as their emblem on their card. And then the cards get distributed as soon as the basically the equivalent of the state credentials are done, because we take that thumbprint and use that as the thing that unlocks the card. It cannot be unlocked by anybody but you.
Okay.
So it's a biometric identifier, and the card has a lot of functions. The card can serve as a passport, or travel card. It can serve as a combined credit card. You can load MasterCard, Visa, American Express, all that stuff you can load onto this one card. It can act as an international ID, and it gives you access to your national credits so that you can pay off bills that come to the municipal persons. You know, the utility bills, the mortgages, the property taxes, all of that stuff can be paid using the vendor card. And so,
Greg, I'd suggest if, as you shotgun Anna, forward me one of them and just put personally, and just put arrivederci on it, and next week or so I'd pick it up. Okay.
Okay.
And I just can get you to a better trash pile than everybody else.
Okay, I will do that. Thank you very much. I'm sorry, what?
I say I do get totally overwhelmed at times.
I would imagine. Thank you very much for your time here. I yield.
Anna, with that, a reminder, I'm just reminded this in the chat. Thank you, James and Diva. The Zendesk could be your solution for your clogs in your emails. What it do, you can have 17,000 people, whoever you want, whoever you assign to look at incoming emails and answer them for you, so you don't have to, and just make sure that they answer correctly as you choose. It could be great for you, and we've got it ready to go if you would like to use it.
Okay, well, it's something I'd like to discuss and learn more about.
Yeah.
I've obviously had lots of people pretending to be me already. So
yes.
I'm just now trying to get back control of my Facebook account, you know?
Well, but at least, anyway, it's an option for you. Thank you very much for tonight. Thank you for all of your time and your energy. And Harold, thank you for your email and your phone. I'm so sorry. They're out there now, both of you.
And one moment before you go, Anna. Okay, everybody unmute.
Thank
you, Anna.
Thank you, Anna.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bless you.
Thank you.
Interesting. Interesting.
Thank you very much.